Thanks, bro. Morning, everyone. What's going on? Oh. Well, you need my phone, Danny's phone?
This is your phone.
Oh, here. Boom. Sorry, we're just new mic, so we're checking to make sure that it's actually working. Just a second. Okay, thank you. So if you will join me in a word of prayer, we're going to get started today. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this day. We thank you for the opportunity to set ourselves apart, to stand on holy ground, to turn our hearts to you. And God, I pray that your anointing would be upon each and every one of us to receive what you are speaking forth to us. God, I pray that you would anoint me, that you would empower me and get whatever parts of me out of the way that need to be out of the way for this word to come forward the way you want, God. Not too much or too little, but in that perfect sweet spot of what your people need to hear in this moment. I thank you for what you've done in putting this message together. And I pray that you would just give us eyes to see, ears to hear, and a heart to comprehend what your Spirit is saying to your church today. Especially those of us here at Iona, God, I pray that you would equip us for every good work in your name. Amen. Our message today is titled The Joyful Warrior. So if you're taking notes, that's what we're going to be speaking about. I'm aware that it's Mother's Day, and talking about men on Mother's Day is kind of funny. I just pray about what God wants to talk about, and that's what we go through. So, but while I was in worship, God was just kind of reminding me that the greatest gift that you could give a mother is a man who's really a man. Whether that's the father who raised her, the husband who stands beside her, or that's the greatest gift as her sons grow up, that they would be real men. And hopefully she can experience all three. But yeah, it's a building block of what we need. And it's kind of glaring, the more we mix up the formula in our modern culture, and the less and less men are really living up to the call upon them to be men, everything suffers. And I think it's really a building block. If you're not a man, then you can't really be a man of God. And if you're not a man of God, then you can't really be a vessel for Jesus in this age. And then God can't really come forward the way that he wants to in our ministries and our churches. And it's really a huge thing. There's a reason Satan's working so hard to checkmate this stuff. So today we're going to be talking about what it means to be a joyful warrior, which is really about the heart that God has for men to stand up and to live strongly. If you say that particular phrase, joyful warrior, in my household, everyone will immediately think that you're talking about my son, because that's actually sort of the handle or the prophetic title or whatever that God has used over and over with me when I've been praying for my son. He talks about him being a joyful warrior. And this goes back before he was born, maybe even before he was conceived. And it's just been kind of cool watching my son get to that age. He's over 1 year old now. I don't know the exact months. I probably should. But he's getting to that age, like 6 months, right? Yeah. So like 1 year and 6 months. But he's getting to that age where he is starting to display a little bit of that. You know, you can see the joyfulness on him. He's a very joyful, smiley kid. And he also has that gruff, he'll growl at you and stuff, but it's joyful, but it's very masculine. He's got that little warrior heart to him. And he kind of inspired this sermon in a way, because I was talking to God about who he is. I try to pray about that fairly often because I don't want to get in the way of what God's doing. I want to be helpful as a father. I want to be pushing in the right directions and not frustrating my kids or God and what he's trying to do. But it's been a while of God talking to me about, that Gideon's going to be a warrior of a man. And we named all of his names point to that. It's like Gideon Everett is all warrior title sort of thing. And also the joyfulness. And the joy of the Lord is our strength, and understanding that and seeing it in him, even in this miniature, immature form. Like that's there. You can see the roots that are going to grow into the tree, And, excuse me, my voice is a little froggy today, but it's a crazy thing to be in prayer and to see that, and then to come out and see it's like, I don't know, foreshocks or whatever. It's before the big reveal, but you could see it. And there's something about that where I look at that and I go, I want to be like that. I want to be like that. I want to be like my son. It might sound comical, but there's a part of my heart that looks at my son and says, when I grow up, I want to be like him. I want to grow up and be like my son. And I don't know your guys' experiences, everybody's, to a degree. I know some people's, but that's not something you see a lot with fathers, We have a father and your father ever says, oh man, I hope that one day I'll be like you. Like it's always, it's always, I'm up here, you're down there. I'm telling you, I'm teaching you, you're sitting at my feet and learning. And it kind of surprised me when that started to stir. And it was almost like God was looking at me and saying, well, of course, that's how you should feel whenever you're praying about any other man. Is if you're, it doesn't matter how broken he is, doesn't matter where he is or how young he is. Like if you're really praying and you're not judging him by his flesh, you start judging him by the Spirit, and God starts telling you about who that guy is. Then you start getting a clear picture, an intercession of that guy. There should always be a part of him that pops up to you and you go, I'm not like him. This guy has a gift that I don't have. God has made him to serve. Like he's a finger or a thumb or an ear, but he's a different part of the body of Christ than me. And there's a part of us that should see that and say, wow, how cool is that? And then there's a part of us that should say, I know I will never be as good at that job as he is, but man, I would kind of like to have some of that rub off on me. That should be natural. When we were in Cameroon, we would get stopped all the time, and people would see we were white, so the gendarmes would come up, and they'd stop us, and they'd just hold us up for like an hour on the side of the road, hoping we would bribe them, because they were used to white people just bribing them at some point. So they were hoping for some money, so they'd just sit around, and they'd look at you like, are you going to bribe me yet? And as Christians, we wouldn't do it. And eventually, and we worked with this taxi driver, Moses, and he would try to explain to them, look, they're not these other white people that are here, part of big companies or whatever. They just throw their money around. They're broke, and it's against their religious beliefs. They're not gonna bribe you. They won't be part of it. We'll sit here all day. And sometimes, and I was talking to him about this, and he was like, sometimes then they'll ask me for a bribe. Like, oh yeah, but you're an African, you'll bribe us, right? And he goes, but I don't want to give them my money. So I go, no. And they're like, oh, are you white now? And they would kind of accuse him of, oh, you're getting whitewashed by hanging out with these white missionaries. And what he would say, and it was always funny to me, he would say, well, if you go to sleep under a mango tree, you'll wake up smelling like mangoes. That's what he would say. And I was thinking about that for whatever reason, God kicked that into my head while he was talking to me about this, the idea of coming under the shade of another man's tree. And that there are times in our lives where actually God's calling us into fellowship with other men. And it's like when you really can understand, like, this guy is gifted in a way that I'm not gifted. and you stand under that. You allow that to bless you, or you just want to be around it and see it happen. Just watch it. Watch somebody else minister. Watch somebody else step out and just absorb it by osmosis. You're just sitting under the tree and you walk away smelling like mangoes. It's just that experience of it. And it was like God was waking me up, like how divided and broken our idea of masculinity is, that we can't do that without feeling undermined, that we can't do that without feeling like, oh, I'm lesser. Like I need to be great at everything. I need to be better than everyone at everything. And if I admit someone's better than me in any other area, like it breaks me. There's like it's an active competition on every level or something. And yeah, in fatherhood, I think, 9 times out of 10, you are going to be up here and they're going to be down there, because that's the relationship when they're little kids, and it's your job to train your son how to be a man. That's what it's going to be. He wants that. He wants to sit at your feet. Dad, teach me. He wants that. And even if you wanted to change it, it's still going to be 90% of the time that's what it is. But I felt like God pointing out, like, but even now you should be able to see something. You should see something that puts you on an equal footing, more than equals, where it's like, my son is to some degree already naturally above me in this area, and he will continue to be. Because at some point, the whole relationship has to give way to that. It has to give way to the body of Christ, where you see him, he's a man, and he's gifted in ways that I'm not gifted, and we meet on equal footing. And if that never happens, it's like a mother who doesn't stop babying her, so like she infantilizes him, right? At some point, he's going to have to reject mom if she won't stop treating him like a baby. And mom can either be the person who clings to that, keeps trying to baby him until he has to reject her, and there's this tearing of the relationship. So it's like, I got to choose between you and being a man. Either keep mom and I act like a baby around mom and it weakens me, or I'm going to be a man and when she tries to baby me, I'm going to have to reject that. Or mom can be that wise woman who's trained in the ways of God, and she recognizes, I got to be the first one to recognize he's not a baby anymore. I got to be the first one to stand up and be proud of him and transfer from coddling to this pride that I have another man to guard over me and to guard over this family. And in the same way, as fathers, we need to have that heart. It's like there's a day that's rushing up. It's not a long time. My son's 1 year old. The chances are that 10 years from now, 11 years from now, 12 years from now, the job is going to be mainly done. We don't think that. The kid's 21, 23, 25 years old, and we're still, he's still a kid. Listen, if he's 15, 16, and he doesn't know what it means to be a man, he's probably never going to learn it from you. If you haven't planted those seeds, but the whole point is the formative years. It's when he's 7, 8 years old. That's when you're going to plant the seeds and be like, this is what it means to be a man. Now, him growing into maturity in that's another story. But you can only be so much of that story. You can be a counselor when he's 18, 19 years old. Even 17, but the ship's already sailed. You've either taught him what it means to be a man by then, or you failed to. And you're playing cleanup. And in reality, you're probably not going to be a big part of that. That's probably the church that's going to have to come up behind you and clean that mess, because there's too much trauma for you to be fixing it. That's usually the situation. So there's a place in our hearts that we have to prepare, where we can look at our sons and our daughters and we can see value that exceeds our own in this area or in that area, and realize like the trap of fatherhood is I'm raising up someone to be exactly like me. And if that's true, then you always have to keep him down here, or you're redundant. The prince has grown up. When is the king going to kick the bucket and give him the throne? And then you'll become a bad king that's trying to keep his son down here because he doesn't want to be replaced. You become a King Herod. I don't want a new baby king raising up, because he's going to, now I'm in competition and I got to beat this kid down to keep him from competing with me. And you need to realize from the get-go, chances are your son is going to be nothing like you. That's just something you have to accept from the very beginning. He's not going to be like me. He's going to have a different call. He's going to, like, God has a whole other mission for him in life. What your job is not how to teach him how to live every aspect of his life and be like you and do what you do. Your job is this, to teach him how to be a man. To be a man to be a man in whatever business is his business in this life. What his business ends up being, whether he's celibate or married, have kids or not have kids, whether he's in full-time ministry or whether he's doing secular work or whatever it is, that's not in your hands. God's not going to consult you on that. He might not even tell you about it. Your son might know more about that before you do. Maybe God will use you prophetically to speak into your son's life, but at some point, your son's going to look at you and say, but Dad, I'm called to do this. And it's going to be a shock to you. You don't even know what he's talking about. And you might start saying something, and then you get in the prayer, and God's like, shut up, what are you doing? I'm his father. I'm his heavenly father. Don't you get in the way of us building a relationship outside of you. And if we're not prepared, if we're always thinking of our sons in a small way, then we will be against them growing. At least at the point of when they come up to being close to equal, then all of a sudden we're like, I don't want you to grow anymore. I was proud all the way up to here, now it's a threat. And that holds true for our sons. It also holds true for our brothers in Christ. I'll happily build up this young Christian. I'll happily build up my brother in my accountability group until he gets right about here. And when he starts getting close to equality, in my judgment, equality with me in my judgment, all of a sudden I flip around and it becomes negative. Why? Because we're not opening our eyes like we should be. The fact is, we can sit in the shade of each other's trees. It's gonna make you better. It's going to build you up in a better way. And so basically how this sermon came about was, in a way, I was like, God was inviting me to do this weird thing where I'm a grown man, I'm almost 40 years old, and God's calling me to sit under the shade of my 1-year-old son and everything he's going to grow up into being, and to learn how some of the things like he made shine in my son are better than the ways that I do it. Because there might be times where I look at myself and say, I'm a warrior. I think every man is supposed to be, to one degree or another, a warrior out there fighting for their life, for the kingdom, for their families, for their marriages. It's a battle, right? But if I look at myself, and even right now, my son, like literally my son's living it out better than me right now. Right now, 1 year old, he's kicking my butt on this. He's joyful. He leans into joy. It does give him strength. He finds joy in the presence of God, whether he knows what to call that, but he finds it there better than I do. You know, I'm a warrior perhaps, but I'm not a joyful warrior. I'm a stressed warrior. Sometimes I'm an angry warrior. Sometimes I'm a frustrated warrior. There's a lot of different fuels I try to use, but I'm not very good at the joyful thing. And that's what really put me in this place of leaning into and asking God about, well, what does it mean to be a warrior? And God was kind of speaking to me about where the joy comes from. And a lot of it is about having balance and understanding the needs of your own heart. Like a heart has 4 chambers, right? Human heart. You can't just miss one of those. You can't just throw one of those chambers out of the heart and be like, oh yeah, it's fine. No. You probably won't. It'll probably be stillbirth, right? Probably won't even be alive when it comes out of the womb if it's missing a whole chamber. And it was like God was talking me out of that. So this is what I want to share with you. The 4 chambers of the heart of a joyful warrior. And really we're not all called the same way. This may not be the joyful warrior part. It's not really the center of my call, but it's all something we should be attending to, growing in. We might not be the best shining example of that ever, but it's something we should be pursuing. But I really felt like God was saying there's something about that, about being a joyful warrior, that from that light, God was able to point out really something that applies to all men. Like, this is the masculine heart. This is where it's supposed to be. And there were 4 things. I'm throwing my own kind of titles on them to help draw out how I'm seeing it in the spirit, but take it with a grain of salt, but I think you'll see that they're true. They really resonated with me when God was speaking them to me. So the first thing we need to really step into being a man versus being a man-child versus being the crippled kind of man that is more common than not in our culture today. And I'll put myself in that category. I don't think that I don't think I've attained it. I don't think I've really gotten the full balance here. I've tasted things. God has shown me things. If I judge myself by the worst guy on the street, then yeah, I'm looking pretty good. But if I measure myself against the perfect ideal that is Christ, or even some of his apostles and other people who lived out godly manhood before me, I don't look too good. So I'm learning right alongside us. But this is what I felt like God was speaking. Firstly, to be a man, you need to have a haven. That's one of the chambers of the masculine heart. Is you need a haven, you need a sanctuary. You need a nest that you can sink into to restore yourself when you're just burnt out, when you dry out, when you run out of juice. It's interesting, but it starts there. Remember, the way that God set things up in the beginning was he created everything in 6 days. And on the last day, the very last thing he made was man. So man was created, he came into existence, and God had just finished his job. And they took a Sabbath rest. And then the day after the Sabbath, what happened? Then it was the first work week. And Adam went out and worked in the garden with God. His existence started on a Sabbath, essentially. The sun was going down, he was being created, the sun went down, and it was the Sabbath. So he started in a place of rest, getting built up and recharged. It's like when you buy something and the batteries aren't included, or you fully charge this phone before you use it, turn it on for the first time. That's how God created Adam. He created him with his batteries not charged. The first thing he did was, Adam, we're taking a day off and we're recharging before you go out and start living in your manly identity and being everything you're supposed to be. He puts it first, and I think that's why God set it on my heart first, was this idea that there's so many men trying to do other parts of, grab onto other things. They can sense, oh, my heart's here. I know this is a chamber of my heart, but they leave apart the rest, the restfulness. They say, I don't need a haven. My batteries will never run empty. I got a limitless supply of whatever it takes. I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps, and I don't need help. I don't need strength. I don't need rest. I got an infinite supply. And then it blows up in their face. And what they end up having is they end up having a false haven. It's a sin. It's a substance. It's sex. It's masturbation. It's drugs. It's alcohol. It's binge watching TV through the entire night, waking up all cracked out the next day, pounding espressos, trying to keep yourself going. Because what? Because eventually you ran out of juice. You're just not admitting that that's what's happening. And you run to a haven, but because it's not out in the light, it's not the haven that God wants for you to recharge yourself. And so you feel this weakness. You're haunted by this weakness. You're ashamed of this weakness. But God's saying, that's how I designed you to function. You're just not plugging into the right fuel source. When I speak of a haven, I'm not talking about a physical place. It's not coming home. It's like for a lot of guys, that's what it's my chair in front of the TV with a cold beer, and I put on my show, and I have this thing, and that's my haven. That's a false haven. We're not talking about something physical. We're talking about something that's restorative to your inner atmosphere as a man. It's something that when your atmosphere begins to weaken and it begins to collapse within you, and you feel this weakening from the inside out, that you have someplace you can go spiritually that recharges and reinflates, reinvigorates that inner man. And we can see this. I can look at my son, Gideon, right? He's a little kid. But in some ways, that's perfect. He hasn't been screwed up yet. Hopefully, he never is. Hopefully, I can pull this off fairly well. But right now, he's not screwed up. I can see it. He's a joyful warrior. But then there are times where he runs out of gas. He just gets burnt out. Maybe he got hurt. Maybe he fell down. Maybe it's too close to nap time. Maybe he's hungry. Maybe he's tired. Maybe he's trying to do something. He's trying to walk, and he isn't there yet. So he's getting frustrated. And eventually, he just kind of cracks, right? His tank runs dry, and he begins to lose it. But what does my son do when his tank runs dry? He cries out for mommy. That's what he does. Mom, mom, mom. Ah! He just cries, mama. And mom comes and scoops him up. She's his haven, right? That's how we're designed to work. She's supposed to play that role for a season in his life to teach him what it means to have a haven. She is the picture of what God is supposed to be later in life in that part of our heart. God plays a lot of different roles. He wears different hats. But God wears a mama hat. There is a part of God that is represented there. What does a mom do? She scoops up her little son when he's frustrated, and she just nurtures, she just pours into him. And when they get a little older than my son is, they start talking. They might try to talk to mom. I was trying to play, and I couldn't catch the ball. And I kept trying to catch the ball, and I couldn't do it. And the other kids laughed at me. And what she doesn't even talk about, it's just shh. She just pushes that aside. And she reaches right into the heart. And she just loves him. She just loves him because she can see who he is. She can look right into his eyes, right into the center of his heart, and she just loves him for who he is. And see, that's the crushing part of living in the world, is you're judged on everything except who you are. You're judged by every aspect of your performance all the time. And the insinuation all the time, sometimes it's an outright accusation, but all the time, at very least, it's an insinuation that, oh, if you suck at these external things, if your performance falls down, if you fail, then that represents who you are, points right to your heart, to the essence of who you are. If this sucks, you suck. If the job you just did sucks, you suck. If you failed at this job, you're a loser. It's why we can't look at another man and say he's better than me, because that would mean I'm worse than him, which would mean, well, I'm crap. We have a hard time separating the exterior from the interior. And even as a little boy, my son gets frustrated, it internalizes in, but he knows what? He knows to run to his haven. He runs to mama, she holds him. And she brushes aside the performance issues. It's not her job. That's what dad does later on. It's not her job to speak of the performance. And she will not do it. If she's a wise woman, she's well trained, she will push that away. I'm not going to talk about that. I'm not your judge when it comes to the exterior. That's for another time, another conversation with your dad. I'm pushing that away. I'm looking at you. I'm judging your heart. I'm looking at who you are as a person, the unchanging essence of your character. And I'm telling you, I love you, and you're worth it. And she just pours into him. There's three big lessons that a healthy mother, and I know we didn't all get one, but what a healthy mother teaches their son in that season. And this is little boy time. My son's learning it right now from his mom. Number one, they're learning you're needy, and that's okay. That you have, and you don't have an unlimited tank. This is something you have to catch up. There are times when your tank is full, you feel like it'll never go empty. You just feel, I'm the man. Like you just feel like it's never going to run out. It will. And that's not something to be ashamed of. My son has no shame about it. I've been watching him, and that's part of the part I go, I wish I was like that. Because my son's a joyful warrior, and then he falls down and he cries, and he melts down, he's a little baby, mom scoops him up, and he just lets go into it, man. He has no shame in his game, man. He's not hiding any of his neediness. He just pours it out, and then he gets filled back up. And his mom puts him down, he wipes his tears, and he comes right back into the game. And there's no shame that he had to go and get his tank refilled. And for most of us, we've lived our whole life with the shame of that. It's a shameful thing to go, that I need help, that I'm empty, that I can't push on in my own strength. And most of us, what we do is we repress the need until the need turns into something nasty, until it corrupts, until it perverts itself into something that now we really do need to be ashamed of it. It's not cool that when you're having a bad week, you got to get on Pornhub to make yourself feel better. It's not cool. When you have that, it might not be such a drastic thing, but I know guys, they have, maybe it's only once every other month, but they hit a low point and they have to hit the dispensary and they're eating some gummies and they're hiding it from everybody in their life that they're getting high. They're pounding shots of alcohol. They stop at the liquor store, pick up a little flask bottle, and they're pouring it in their Coke when nobody's looking. People that just wait, middle of the night, they're just pounding food, busting a diet that God's been trying to get them in shape. They're just shoving their faces full. Why? Because they've hit empty and they're ashamed to admit it. They're ashamed to get it worked out the right way. But eventually you can't argue with hunger. There's a point where hunger wins. And if you wait long enough and you get it out of control enough, it'll blow up in your face. That's the bad thing, is not taking it to the right place and waiting until you cannot control it. It's like anger. God doesn't say, oh, it's an instant sin to be angry. What does he say? He says, in your anger, do not sin. Do not let your sun go down while you're still angry. He's saying, go deal with your anger the right way, immediately. Catch it early. Deal with it quickly. Don't just keep shoving it down and letting it simmer and corrupt itself inside of you until it just vomits out of you uncontrollably. Hunger is not an evil thing in itself, but if you let it go long enough, starvation is. Starvation is nasty. God was showing me this picture of the world, and it was just a concentration camp of freaking starving people, just starving for love, starving for meaning and purpose and all these things, and they're just ripping at each other. And they're forming little cliques, little gangs in the prison camp, and they're trying to get leverage on each other, and gradually I could see it getting dressed up. Some of these gangs are companies and people in business suits, and some of them are churches, and there's these little pecking orders, and people, they're trying to get what they need by stealing from each other. And God's over here with everything that you need. Why have you traded the springs of everlasting life for broken cisterns that don't hold water? Why have you rejected me? Why are you out there seeking it in these other ways? Why? Because it looks like I'm doing something over here. I'm not being a crybaby coming to God, melting into a puddle in his lap. But over here, I'm burning, I'm fighting, I'm ripping the bread out of somebody else's mouth. It feels better for whatever reason. But it's off. The gospel, it's not. The gospel isn't you going out and stealing the bread out of somebody else's mouth. The gospel is what you feed even your enemies. They're hurting you and you give them something to eat. They're hurting you and you bless them. Why? Because freely God is given to me, and so freely I can give. If you can't get a hold of that chamber of your heart, you'll never be a man. Not a true man. Not the man that God created. Not that image. Because it starts in the Sabbath. It starts in this rest where you go to God and he freely gives to you. Not that you earn it. Not that you pumped enough weight. Not that you've done enough things. Not that you've pulled yourself up by your own bootstraps. But simply like a little crying baby. Like a baby cries and runs to its mother. You run to God and say, I'm hungry. I'm needy. And I need you. A lot of us, we're just too ashamed. When we come to God, we put on a mask. I'm going to do something for you, God. I'm going to do something to make up for all my mistakes. All the times I've been going out and eating in the sin diner to try to fill my emptiness, I'm going to make up for you. And God's like, I don't want you to make it up. I want you to sit down and eat my food so that you'll be able to resist that later on. So you won't be so starved that you can't overcome your temptations. You won't be so weak and empty that you don't have anything, not even to give your enemies. Forget about it. You don't have anything to give your family. You don't have any love to pour out on your kids or your wife. You're empty, and you're just trying to squeeze blood out of a rock all day. You see it with men all the time. They are so desperately dry and empty, and they're trying to give. They have nothing to give from. And all that it does is they look at their emptiness, and they're just more shame, more shame. I'm not enough. Why can't I pull through? And I just don't want to let anyone know that I don't have what it takes. Brother, you weren't designed to have what it takes. You were designed to have room for God to pour in what it takes. But if you don't come to him and receive, you'll never have anybody to give. Your destiny is to freely give because you freely received. You leave out the freely received part and you will be desperately empty. And instead of giving in relationships, you'll always be trying to steal. You'll always be trying to, you'll find yourself, you look at your relationship with your wife and say, I'm just manipulating her to get what I want. I'm not really giving. At best, it's 50-50. At worst, it's I'm taking more than I'm giving. You look at your kids, say, I'm taking more than I'm giving. And that doesn't feel right as a man. In other relationships, you might get away with it. But as a man in these situations, you can't be a thief. You can't be somebody who's a burden. Everything in your heart goes wrong with that. And the answer from God is so simple, but it's also so difficult for most men, which is this. Your answer is because God has designed you. He's trained you up to draw near to him. To draw, like first thing in the morning, not for you to hit the day running, I want to go do great things, but for the first thing in the day to come in need to God and say, I need you to tell me that I'm worthy of my existence. I need you to tell me I wasn't a mistake. I need you to look at me and say that I was worth your son's death that you paid for me. I need you to speak in the parts of me that the world speaks into all day long, says not enough, worthless, loser. And I need you to speak a louder voice that will hold that territory and fill my tank. And I know I might need to check in by lunch break. I might need to do this again. I might need to do this 4 or 5 times to get through a day. But I'm going to be aware of my tank, and I'm going to be aware of when it's dry, and I'm going to run to you. Not for a plan. This is what we do with God. It's weird. We're trying to get him to help us eat at another table instead of eating at his. Say, God, help me be successful so I can eat the success and fill this hole. God, help me be more impressive so I can eat at this table of impressing other people so I can feel like I'm a man. Instead of coming to God and just saying, I need you. It's like a boy that comes to his mama and says, everybody says I'm bad at baseball. Will you tell me that I'm good? It's like, no, that's not what she should do. She should say, I don't know anything about baseball. I don't care about that. I care about you. I know who you are. And no matter what's going on out here in your performance, I know who you always are and always will be. And you know what it is? It's worthy of the investment. You're worthy of the investment, son. That's all you really need. You could have the worst performance right now. You could look at your life and say, I have failed at everything I set out to do in my life so far. That's crushing, but it's only crushing if you say that equals I'm a piece of garbage. If you think you're a piece of garbage and you suck at everything, it's over. And if you spent your whole life trying to overcome the sense that you're a piece of garbage by trying to perform out here well enough, then you can't have this fail on the outside. There's nowhere left to go. But the answer to that situation is to come forward to God, and God pushes all that away and says, yeah, son, we'll talk about that later. But let's face the facts, even if you really do suck out here as much as you think that you do. That's not the question. The question is, do you deserve another chance? And another chance after that, and another chance after that. Do you deserve the investment? What happened with the prodigal son? He was sitting there at the pig trough having taken his father's inheritance and spent it on prostitutes. He shamed his father's name. And he's sitting there looking at the pig slop and he's deciding, would my dad give me another chance? Would he invite me back? Would he feed me again? What did he do when he came back? He threw the coat on his shoulders, put the signet ring on, gave him new sandals, threw a party for him. That parable, the heart of it is like, yes, it is important to figure out that after God sows into you, that you would freely give to others, that you wouldn't waste it on sin, that you wouldn't waste it on selfishness, because you cut yourself off. The sin takes you into another country far from your father's house. But there's a worse sin that's revealed. It's the elder brother, right? He never asked his dad for anything. He's the one who's on the outside at the end of the parable. What did the first son do? He asked for an inheritance. He got it. He wasted it. And then he said, I think I'm going to ask my dad for some more. And his dad gave him more. Because he said, I want you to ask. Freely receive from me, son. Freely receive from me. Keep coming back. And I'll teach you eventually how you can trust this. That it's always going to be here for you. And so you can stop trying to hoard it and be this selfish person. I can teach you how to be selfless. But you have to keep coming and receiving. Otherwise, you're going to be so hungry, you can't learn to be selfless when you're starving. You got to let me feed you and feed you and feed you. And when you wake up one morning and you realize it's always going to be there, that's the day you're going to start to be able to give. Until then, you're not going to be able to break through that. God can work with the prodigal. He can't work with the eldest son who says, not until I've earned it. Not until I'm going to freely give before I've received. You're bankrupt, man. You have nothing to give. You'll never be able to perform well enough to earn what God wants to pour into you, because the only way you can earn it is to receive it first. And out of his fullness, out of his overflow, you achieve it. Not the other way around. Who was locked out? The man who said it's not fair. Standing out there saying, this guy's sinful because he's asking. I would never ask. I still don't think I'm worthy to ask. It sounds humble, but it's displeasing to your Father. It's not what he wants. The lesson that your mom is supposed to teach you about this haven in your childhood is, number one, your tank is not limitless. There's nothing shameful about it. You were designed that way. You're supposed to run well with your tank full, and you're supposed to run crappy with it empty. And that you're supposed to learn, oh, my tank's about half empty. I better go get recharged. I shouldn't run on fumes and end up stuck on the side of the road every other day. I should watch my gauge. I should sense it. I'm not having the strength. My confidence is weakening. The words of other people and the words of the enemy, they're sinking in too deep. I've weakened. My inner atmosphere is collapsing. My inner awareness is collapsing. I need to go back and get recharged. The second lesson that you're supposed to learn in the haven is you're worthy of it. That's what happens. That's what happens when you're in. It restores an atmosphere of peace, where you can look at the idea that people are investing in me and I'm not succeeding yet. I'm still trying to get to my level, but I'm not there yet. And you can be at peace in that situation. The natural man can't. The natural man's always striving to hit a perfection that he can't hit without God. And the whole time he's on a bed of razors, just slicing himself up because he can't have peace. Not without that perfection, but God can come to you in the midst of your imperfection, give you peace in that situation. Why? Because he says, hey, you're worth the effort, son. You're a little boy, you're my son Gideon's age. There's no way you can be a man right now. But mom can make it feel okay that he's not. Maybe he can't walk right now. He's trying, keeps falling over. Mom can make that okay. He tried to play baseball as hard as he can. He can't throw it as hard as dad can. He keeps swinging the bat, just nothing but air over and over again. Strike, you're out. Strike, you're out. Strike, you're out. And it would fill him with shame, except he can go to mom and that gets wiped away. You're worth it. You'll get it eventually. But don't even worry about it. You're still worth it. That's the message of Jesus on the cross. When we were still sinners, when our performance sucked, and there was no way our performance was ever going to get better, Jesus came and died for us. His Father offered up his Son for you. Can you imagine taking one of your sons and offering them up? Like, even if you knew that he would be resurrected, can you imagine watching your son get nailed to a cross and hang there screaming, even at the end saying, Dad, why are you doing this? Why are you leaving me here to die? Can you imagine doing that for someone? Can you imagine if I did that to my son for you? Would there be any question that I loved you? Would you ever question it? And if you looked me in the eye afterwards and I said it wasn't a mistake, you are worth it. God doesn't make mistakes. He never does. So what happens? Why don't we get that? Some of us messed up mothers, messed up fathers. You try to go to the haven, you get pushed away. Man up, wipe your tears off, rub some dirt in it, whatever. That transition needs to be carefully walked through, because there is an age. You're not supposed to be 35 and run into your mom's lap to cry it out. That's not right. But if that's misgauged, that gets stomped on, maybe your dad stomps on it, maybe your mom rejects you. Maybe a whole bunch of guys laugh at you, picking fun at little crybaby led him to his mama. And that gets broken at the wrong time. Then maybe you say, no, I reject havens altogether. Instead of, no, you're going to grow out of this haven. This is the training wheels haven. There is a haven which is the presence of God. You don't have to run to anybody. You run internally to God. You see it metaphorically. It's in all sorts of forms. Like, the reason why people kind of like the samurai, right, is the samurai sits there and he's meditating or something, and he's sitting there, and then he gets up and he can fight. And if he's broken, he just sits down, and then he can fight again. Or the old Crusader knight, he holds up his sword like this, so it's like a cross that he prays, and he has a place to go to regenerate his strength. It looks cool, right? There's something that touches our heart, that warrior poet. right? Because he has something inside. That's right. It isn't right for a grown man to run to his mother, but it's not because havens are bad. It's just because that's not a mature haven. That's an immature haven. There's nothing wrong with my son doing it right now. But there'll be a day when I need to help guide him through that process of exchanging the training wheels for the two-wheeler. Being able to stand on his own 2 feet with the help of God in that situation. But if that gets biffed, then you start walking around with shame for needing things. And so you avoid help, and it just makes you more shameful in your eyes because, man, my tank's even emptier. If your tank's never full, man, you feel shamed all the time. You're ashamed to go and get refilled, then you're living in perpetual starvation, and you are a disgusting person there, and you do nasty, horrible things because you're not getting your tank filled. It's a vicious cycle that chews you up and spits you out. Mom taught us that we're needy, that our tank gets empty sometimes, and that there's nothing wrong with that, that we're worthy of the effort. We deserve that haven, and we need to receive from it. That's what we're designed to do. And so we begin to pursue that. The third lesson, and this is the hardest one to really teach because it is a training wheel that you're supposed to, but the lesson that we're supposed to get, the third lesson, is that the well won't run dry. To lock it in, to sink into that place. And that's what God ultimately wants to teach us, is that my haven, my table is perfect. It's never been going to be closed to you. There might be times when I won't give you exactly what you want, but I'll always give you what you need. I'll always fill you up and make you strong. You never need to be strong in yourself. You're not capable of that. That's a trap. That's a lie of Satan meant to tie you up in little knots. Don't fall into that hole. So we can look at it. We can say, do I have a haven? I'm going to tell you, all men need a stronghold inside of themselves that gains them an unshakable peace. A peace in who they are, right then, right there. Doesn't matter what's going on. Doesn't matter how bad you've been defeated. It doesn't matter how much you've been humiliated. It doesn't matter how bad you failed. It doesn't matter what's going on in your life, how strong the rejection is. You can go to this place and have peace with who you are right now, because God says, forget about the externals. Let me look at who you eternally are, who I created you, the essence of your character. And he just looks at it and he loves it. And this experience could be it could just be sitting in the silence with God staring at your heart, just smiling at it and letting that slowly wash over you. It could be a time of worship where you just come to God with this aching hole inside of you, and you just present it. And you worship him and thank him for being, even before he feels it, you worship him for doing it before he does it. You see, the reason we don't go to the haven is it's usually two things. One is it's false food. We're empty, and we take that emptiness and we chase after something other than God to fill it. Might be sex. A lot of young guys, they lose mama, and right around that time they gain horniness from puberty, and they just, if there's something to just shut my brain off and make me stop feeling like a loser, an orgasm will do it pretty well, and they'll just get tied up in pornography, whatever. They just get addicted to it. Other people, and that can open the door to all sorts of addictions: alcohol, cigarettes, all sorts of drugs. Sometimes it's just achievement. That same age is like, I'll go learn how to play baseball. I crack that ball out into the field, and the cheers, everybody stands up. Good job, man. Woo! They start screaming for me, and that momentary high of everybody loves me. It fills the hole that mama used to fill when she stroked my face and said it. But it's twisted, right? Because they don't love you for you. They love you for your performance. The other way it goes wrong is what I call false hurdles. You might come to God. You say, I come to God all the time, but you never come to him for that, because you're trying to feed it other places. Or Or you're like, I know God can fulfill me, but wait, I got to jump over right through the right loops. I got to cross the T's. I got to dot the I's to earn it. I need to be, you're the elder son in the parable of the sower, or the parable of the prodigal son. I got to earn it. And 30 years later, you'll be like, why did that guy he's a sinner. He just came back, said God's loving on him, filling him. God's not even giving me a young goat to eat with my friends. God doesn't touch me like that. He doesn't heal me like that. And jealousy starts bubbling up out of your spirit. And God looks at you and says, man, you never asked me for anything like that. You just asked me for something to go out and earn greatness with. To earn love, to earn approval, to escape rejection, to earn acceptance. But you never come to me and say, God, you're the one who created me, and your love is all that matters. And God, the fact is, if I'm ever going to be worth it, then I would have to already be worth it. And I just need to face into the wind. Was it a mistake to make me? Was it a mistake to send your son to die for me or not? And to let God reach into that part of your heart and speak the word that needs to be spoken. Or maybe it's not even, maybe it's just a shine of his approval upon you. Just say, sit there for a second, son. Let me smile on you. And let him fill that tank back up. If you look at men, usually, like I said, everybody's got a haven, but sometimes it's a counterfeit. There's two basic counterfeits. One is a haven of pride. The other is a haven of pity. And even with drugs, these other things that numb you out, it's still there. You can look at it. Really look at your life and you're honest, you'll say, there are days when I run out of juice. My inner atmosphere collapses. I'm literally getting depressed. I'm crushing in on myself. And if you look at what you do when you're hungry, if you will look at what you do in that moment, you'll figure out what lie you're believing in there. Where does it come from? There's two things that happen. One is on an early time, and maybe even with your mom, you start replacing the peace of the haven with pride. And that might be you come, Mom, I sucked the sport, kids made fun of me because I couldn't throw the baseball right. And she holds you and she tries to be a dad and she tries to talk about your performance. And so she basically lies to you about your performance. And she tries to take the fact that you're gold on the inside and pretend that means you already have gold in your performance, and you don't. It's not true. Oh, you're the best baseball player I've ever seen. You're amazing. And she doesn't know what she's talking about. Later on, you look back and you're embarrassed because you're like, no, it wasn't. She was like, like you had to say that because you're my mom. That's what we say about it, right? But what does that do? It teaches you pride, because pride is pretending your performance is good when it's not. Is puffing yourself up that you're a great person and doing all these amazing external things when you're not actually doing any of them. It's a lie. How many people can I get to believe that I'm amazing? Cover up the fact that that's not what's really going on. It's an empty balloon that has to pop eventually. Pride goes before the fall, right? What is the proverb saying? Humility is the road to honor. It's not the right way. It's not the right way. The other thing that will happen is sometimes we'll run to mom, and for whatever reason, she's not being a haven today. She's upset, she's angry, she's too much, she's a human being. And so you're trying to get access to the haven, but the haven's saying no in a way that God will never say no, but she's trying to say no. And what do? You accidentally realize, if I'm really, really pitiful, it'll break her heart and she'll let me in. If I'm just really a pathetic victim, it's so unfair. If I really turn it up, she'll open the door and let me in. And so what do you start learning? You start learning about what? Either I can go in the pride way or I can go in the pity way to get the haven. But that's not really the haven, it's counterfeit. Why? Because it doesn't lead to peace. It leads to this pumped up, swole feel, I'm so awesome, I'm a god, and it's all so clearly a lie. And it's just a matter of time before it pops and you're absolutely demolished. Pride goes before the fall. Why? Because you're running around thinking something that's not true. You're going to hit a wall eventually and realize I've been living a lie and it's going to crush you. It's going to crush you. Pity Pity's the same way. Like, you're setting yourself up for failure. I need to fail to maintain the pity. I need to keep sucking at life. Otherwise, how do I get access? I need this. I need this whether I'm doing good or bad. So how do I keep on saying it's okay? I see guys that have, like a lot of times it's a porn addiction or something. And you can see it. They have to set themselves up to fail in their life. Because otherwise, how can they feel so bad about themselves that it doesn't matter? I might as well do it. They can't be doing great and do it. I'm a champion. Let's go masturbate. I'm a champion. No, you go, it doesn't even matter. And this part, the self-pity leads into it. They don't even realize they're feeding it that way. I know guys that way it's anger. Why? Because when I'm angry, I don't have to feel bad. When I'm angry, I'm just, it's just like any other drug. I stop feeling anything but the anger. You know, when I first did marijuana, I didn't like it very much. But then I realized, it doesn't matter what I feel like. If I smoke a bunch of pot, I'll always feel the same way. It's not a great feeling. But if you come from a bad feeling, it's pretty good. Just numbs you out. Anger's like that. I could feel weak. I could feel like a failure. I feel like a complete loser. But then I flip my lid. I don't feel like a loser then. I feel like I could punch a hole through a brick wall right now. But after you sober up, it's just like any other addiction. What an ass. What a jerk I've been, you know? Because why I'm not sober? The whole point was to lose my sober judgment because I couldn't carry the weight of it anymore. You always end up judging it wrong if you don't go to God. That's what the haven is. It's coming into a place where God can judge you. It's laying yourself out before Him. We want God to judge our performance all the time. Tell me if I did a good job. But do you let God come and push all that aside and say, tell me if I'm a good person? Tell me if I'm a good man. Tell me if I was a mistake, God. Was I your first screw up? Shouldn't have made him. Not worth it. That's what people tell you. That's what people will tell you your whole life. Every time they say you're not worth the investment. Every time someone turns away from you, you're not worth the friendship, you're not worth the hug, you're not worth the word of affirmation, you're not worth this little tiny thing I could do to help you. You're not worth it. God stands there and says, don't worry about that, son. I know you're needy. I know your tank runs dry. You don't need to be ashamed of that. I designed you to need me. What I need is for you to come to me, and I need you to learn my well never runs dry. You don't need those crappy cisterns. Stop breaking your heart over the fact they don't hold any water. Stop breaking your heart after the fact that the prostitutes in the world you visit aren't faithful to you. And sometimes it doesn't matter how much money you have, doesn't matter how much you invest in them, they can't take your pain away. Forget about it. You don't need any of them. You have a haven. The well never runs dry here. You never have to be weak again. That's not how this works. You can be in a place where I say, Robert, give your last 2 pennies, the last ounce of strength, pour it out for this other person. And you will have the faith to do it because you know that the table's full. Sometimes God will be like, no, we're going to let the tank get real low this time before I let you in. He wants you to knock on the table early. Don't get me wrong, knock on the door. But there are times when God will say, hold on. I'm going to get you down to your last 2 cents. I'm going to tell you to give it to somebody else. And when you do that, I'm going to unlock this table for you. I'm going to fill you right back up to the brim again. Why? He's training you. The well never runs dry. You never have to hoard. You never have to be selfish. That's not what a man is. You can't be a man and secretly be hoarding stuff behind your back. I can't give this to my family. I need my me time. I need this. And you just keep shoving stuff behind you. It fundamentally betrays who you are. And that will dig into your soul. It will eat you alive from the inside out. It sounds strange, but to be strong, you have to make friends with your neediness. You need to realize my tank gets empty. And if I ignore it, if I pretend it's not happening, if I try to feed it in the wrong ways, and you know because you never talk to God about it. You never come, God, why do I have a tank that runs empty? This seems like a bad design. And you never talk to God. What is this thing for? Is it supposed to be here? And if I am supposed to have it, how do I get it filled? And what are the rules about filling? If you never had that conversation, I can tell you right now you have a a lesser lover on the side, bro. You have one over here, and that's what's screwing your life up. Because the thing that God made to give you strength, it's still in the hands of the enemy. You haven't got, because you're too ashamed to even talk about the need, to come to God and say, I am a weak man that needs you. I need something all the time. I can't stand on my own. He goes, good, you're figuring it out. What did Peter say? We carry the treasure of Christ in jars of clay. To reveal the gift is not of ourselves, but of him. It's who we are. There's not another man, there's not another being on the planet that works any other way than that. You don't need to be ashamed of it. It's shameful to go to the wrong source. It's not shameful to go to the right one. You might be even hearing what I'm saying, I know that's true on paper, but that sounds shameful to me, to go to God and just be like, try it. Try it, you'll find out. Ask God to help guide you there. Pray for it every day. God, bring me to that place where you're my haven. Let God brush things aside. Let him be like the mother where you come and this is what's in your heart. And he just brushes things aside. I'm not talking about the performance. I'm talking about you, boy. I'm talking about you. And to be able to drink, half the time you get there and you're just wrestling with the lies. God's trying to say something wonderful to you. He's trying to speak to your heart, and there's just parts of you that are just slapping it away, just slapping his hugs away, just like you ever see someone who's so broken they need a hug. They're just weeping and they're just trying to fight off the tears. And you're trying to give them a hug and they're trying to fight it off. Because they're afraid to let go to the injury. They're afraid to really say it, to be vulnerable. To be vulnerable before God. To say deep cries out onto deep in the roar of the waterfalls. To come to that place and say, God, there is a hole in me that nothing could ever fill except the infinity of God pouring out into me. That's the relationship of Jesus to the Father. That's what it means that he is the begotten of God. That means God is constantly pouring out the fullness of deity into Jesus. That he's been doing this through all eternity. Jesus is the Son who has freely received, and so he freely gives. And he's inviting us, come join the body, that you might have the same relationship with the Father that I have. Where you can say, everything I have is from you, God. And everything you can look at somebody and say, if I've given you anything, it's because he gave it to me. It's not me that's loving you. It's him that's loving you through me. You can't be a man if you don't have the haven. It's something that a man is too busy trying to get out there and make it happen to sit still and be filled. They're too desperate to go and get fed out there to sit here and say, God, feed me first. You'll be able to look at yourself. If you're really open, if you're honest about it, you'll be able to see it. You'll be able to see the haven in your life and be like, it's either I go to a thing, I'm empty and I go do something. And maybe it looks sinful to you, maybe it doesn't. But I go do something and I reinflate myself. And you'll be able to look at the fruit of it and say, that's pride, that's pity, or that's this incredible selfless peace that has God all over it. Because you have something that serves as the haven. It's just whether it's true or counterfeit. You're supposed to have a thing where you come to God and he restores your peace. You go through a storm, man. You remember the old song, The Anchor Holds? The ship is battered, the sails are torn, but the anchor holds. You're supposed to have something where you go into the secret place with God and he looks at you and he accepts you and you feel the strength, the steadfastness of God come into your bones. Because you know your relationship is based on who he is and who you are, and those two things don't change. Your externals will change. Your fruitfulness may change. But who you are, the essence of your identity, that's set. Satan's always trying to talk into that place. And if you leave it in shadows, he can whisper lies and you will believe them. You're a piece of garbage. You're a piece of garbage. You're worthless. And because you're afraid to look at yourself in the mirror, to look yourself in the eyes, he can convince you. When he points enough bad fruit in your life, he can convince you. But if you go to God and he shines on you, it's not going to work. It will work eventually. You get recharged, that tank will run empty again. And that's where you start sensing it. That's where you begin to build up It's part of becoming a man, is learning that. Learning my tank's running empty. I need to get away. That's what Jesus would do. You go away, get alone with the Father. It doesn't say what he prayed about back then, but I can tell you, it can be a powerful place of prayer where it's not about, oh, what are you doing? What are you calling me? It's not always about a checklist. There's times when you just need to stand before God and be known for who you are so that you can see your reflection in his eyes. And he could see yourself the way he sees you. And it's not about puffing you up. It's not about, oh, pitiful. No, it's this peace. You can be absolutely honest with what's going on in your life. I'm not a victim and I'm not amazing. I'm just a guy and I'm failing here and I'm failing here. I'm doing okay over here, but I'm failing over here too. And then be like, but God didn't make a mistake with me. I'm worth it. I'm worth the investment. I'm a work in progress, but God is happy with where I am in my life right now. And so I'm at peace with where I am right now. If you're not coming from that place, desperation, despair, it will crush everything you try to build in your life. It's the first chamber of a man's heart is that haven. You need to have it. God needs to be the haven. You need to remember back. And if you don't remember, it doesn't even matter. You can have the worst mother in history. There's still a part of your heart that was so broken by her. Why? Because you knew what she was supposed to be. Without anyone ever teaching you, you knew what she was supposed to be. That's why it hurts so bad. And if you will face that pain, you'll look into it. You'll understand the empty place that you need to take to God. Now, having the cojones to do that, that's another question. That's how desperate are you? How much will you allow God to humble you that you would come as a broken child? You're a grown freaking man. It's been a long time, if ever, since you crawled into your mama's lap and laid your head on her chest and just cried and let her fill you up. But God's calling you to the same experience with him. There are many different, like I said, God wears a lot of different hats, but when your tank's empty, there's only one he wants to wear. He wants to invite you into the bosom of Abraham. He wants to come here. Let me take hold of you. It's like a soldier pierced over with arrows. He just wants to scoop you up, lift you up, and speak into your deepest heart. Heal the wounds, restore your strength, breathe fresh life into the brokenness of your bones, and put you back together again. We have to be open to that, or we will fail at everything after that. The first chamber of the man's heart is the haven. We need a stronghold of unshakable peace. When we start to get shaken, when things start moving, we can sink right back to that place with God. And the stronger a man, the quicker they can go there. They could take in the middle, kids running around, wife screaming, they just heard this, and oh my goodness, somebody's dead. In the middle of it, you can close your eyes and take a breath, and you drop into that place. And it's just you and God, and his hand is on your heart, and he's like, I got you. This doesn't touch, nothing out there touches this. This is your strength. And the peace rises up, and then you come right back into that storm, a different person. It's the core. The second chamber of a man's heart, I played with different names. You could call it the workshop, call it the training ground. I think I'm leaning on training ground. Call it a dojo if you wanted to. Honestly, that's the image I had in my mind. It's one of those bamboo dojos with the paper window door things and the mats and all that. But every man has a desperate need to grow inside of him. Call it the will, the power, whatever you want to call it. But a man has an instinctive need from the time he's a little boy to grow stronger, to grow more powerful, to become a better leader. He needs power to do that. He needs an ability to do that. And there is something when a man is training himself up, when he is being trained, when he's getting better at something. You know, I think it hits on that verse in Proverbs where it says, as iron sharpens iron, so man sharpens another man. This idea that when men get together, they instinctually do it. Let's try to get better at something. Let's push each other. Even like real competition isn't about squashing the other guy. It's like, can we get better? Let's see what we can do. It doesn't matter if you're working on your golf swing, working on a business, learning a language. It could be 100 different things. But when you're doing something and you're getting even just a little bit better at it, it fulfills a part of your life that if you're not doing that, it just aches. It aches that you're not becoming better. Other people, like if you look at women, that's not necessarily a deep thing in them. Like, oh, I just need to go out. Like that it's not even adventure necessarily, but it's kind of on. I need to go to the frontier. I need to push myself. I need to put myself in a trouble spot. I need to push myself. Where I'm going to get hurt or injured or attacked or pushed back on. I need to go to a place that pushes my envelope, that tests me. There's a part of a man that needs to be tested. There's a part of a man that needs to grow. And if it doesn't, it aches, it empties, it breaks. It's a chamber of the heart of that man that's broken. He needs it. He has to have it. Men need to grow. The reason I called it a dojo or a training field is it's not like in a dojo, right? If you were learning a martial art or something, you're not going out and getting in real fights. It's not like, oh, I need to learn how to fight. I'll go to a bar and slap some big guy in the face and see what happens. He breaks a bottle, stabs me in the neck, and I die. No, what do? Is you go to a dojo and you learn how to fight, and it's a safe way to learn, right? And you're learning in the situation. You're not even sure if you'll ever use it, but it gives you this something. What is it? It's a knowledge of what? That my power is growing. That there is a power in growth. That this is happening inside of me. It's a place where we grow up and we develop our skills, develop our fruitfulness, and we develop our confidence in the things that we're being built up in. God might have you on a shelf. You're not doing anything, but he's calling you. Let's work on preaching. Let's work on praying for people. Let's get into intercession. And you don't even know what it's for, but when you're doing it and you're sharpening that blade and you're getting better at something, there's a part of you that's coming alive. You're like, man, this is awesome when God's doing this. I don't even know when I'll use this. He has me writing. I don't know when God, what is this for? And he doesn't even tell you anything about it. It doesn't really matter. Just train. Just train. And there's power there. You find a man, he could be doing everything else right in his life, but his blade is just rusting in the corner. That man's not going to be right. It's like a tick. It's just going to be just wheedling into his head. It's going to be bothering him because men are supposed to live in preparation for war. Even if the battle's not there, a warrior is always sharpening his sword. He's always polishing his armor. He's always, going through his moves and training, I get that's a physical metaphor, but there's a reality to it. A warrior can't just get fat and sloppy and lazy and be okay. Be like, well, the problem comes, well, I got in shape. No, he needs to stay sharp all the time. He needs to be pushing how good he can be in some area, and God is about that. It's part of our relationship with him. Again, we could look at Gideon, right? My little son. That's what he looks at to me. He'll be in that little warm nest with his mom, and then he gets charged up, and what does he want to do with his full tank? He looks at me and says, Dad, teach me something. Help me grow. Sharpen me, Dad. Make me stronger. Show me how to use power. That's what a boy's about, Bam, 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 just banging on stuff. He's like, I can feel the power. Teach me what to do with the power. That's the hunger in a boy. Show me to use the skill. Give me confidence. Show me how it works. And the job of the father is to invite his son, not throw him out into the world. Dads do that, just right into the deep end. Boom. Learn some humility. Kick them in the butt as they go out. Why? Because you've been so screwed up in your life that you want that to happen to your son. No, but what's a father do? He builds a dojo. He builds a training ground. He says, I'm going to take you to the edge of your envelope, son, but I'm not going to put you into a place of frustration. That's the one big command that God gives fathers. Don't frustrate your kids. Don't put them in a position where they fail and they fail and they fail until they give up. That's not your job. Life is hard enough. You put that kid in a place where he might fail 4 times, but if he sticks to the 5th time, he's going to get a victory in there somewhere. Don't you set tests so hard that you crush that kid. Don't try to break him. Try to train him. Honor his achievements. Give him goals that he can meet and train him up. And that's what God does with us. And we're just like little boys. God gives us a goal. We go, it's not big enough. I'm ready for war. We're not ready. He goes, no, we're going to try this first. But if we'll humble ourselves to our training, there's something that's great that happens when we let God put on the dad hat and take us out into the training ground every day and train us. There's a lot of guys, you get put on a shelf. I've been on a shelf before, man. God's just having you circle your wagons for 4 years. You will walk away if you don't let God train you. And the problem is you're like, when am I ever going to use this? Like, that's not your problem. Your problem is you need to stay sharp. Can you imagine being Joshua in the desert for 4 years? Like, dude, you know how freaking old I'm going to be when we go into the promised land? And God's like, keep sharpening your blade, Joshua. You're the man. Believe me, he was happy that he did it when he came up against Jericho and then Ai and Hazor, all those places. And it said he fought like he was still in his youth. God's like, I know what I'm doing. Stop questioning the small beginning and stay where I need you to be. And the thing is, I don't think Joshua would have survived the desert very well. Maybe he would have never even entered the promised land. Maybe if he had gotten fat and sloppy and was like, what's the point? I'm on a shelf. Maybe he would have never got off of it. You can see it, like, right? If you look at a little boy, if he had that attitude, you're like, man, I don't know if you're ever going to become a man. I don't know if you'll ever find it. You got to step up to the challenges your father lays out for you. You have to. And a lot of us, we didn't have fathers that did that. They either too harsh and they frustrated us, or they just gave up before we even got there. We asked them for a training ground, and they're like, nah, you're all right. So we go to school, we find friends, we try to find a group of boys that are a little, like 3 minutes older than us, that seem manly, that might throw a test at us. What, steal a car? Okay, I'll do it. Do some drugs? All right. Oh, get the third base with that chick? Okay, I'll try. Whatever I can do to train to be a man. God covets that place in your life. That you would step back from all the false teachers, that you would step back from all the false tests and say, God, you set the standard in my life. You challenge me. I won't judge it too small or too big, because you'll always be going one way. It's not enough. And then all of a sudden God gives you, no, it's too much. I can't go into the promise. It's always going to be one or the other. But to learn to, that's part of that relationship. Most of us don't know this. But there's a point where you just trust your dad enough, you jump off a building if he said you could do it. You can do that, son. Because he's taken you to that place so many times. You trust his estimate of you better than your own. That's where God wants to lead you. There's 3 real lessons that a father teaches in that place and that you need to grow in to have that training ground with God, that chamber of your heart. The first lesson is engagement. Father will see it in his boy, and he'll stir it up. He'll start wakening up that. Like right now, I don't have to wake it up. My son just wakes up that way. He's like, wow! He wants to attack life, A real father is always stirring that up in his son. He's saying, wake that up, and I'm going to teach you how to use it. Over and over again. Engage. Because what's the first temptation to man? Be passive. Don't engage. Back up. Hide. Shut down. Let somebody else handle it. See it all the time. I was just recently working on a project with a bunch of guys, and you can see guys that just disengage because they're like, I don't know how to do that. Or I might make a fool out of myself. Or there's a lot of people bantering and making jokes. I'm going to back up. So I don't want to put myself out there. But you see, even a guy who doesn't, man, maybe gets humiliated. But he's there. Man, what a difference that makes. I remember learning that about being on like a job site and working. It's like, what do I know? Like, my dad didn't even, really teach me how to swing a hammer. It was always, he's doing it. Well, nobody's, it's just never a thing, So you don't know things, and you go around other guys and they know it really well. And there is an attitude of like, yeah, we're not going to deal with pride around here. And that's the reality. That's what a lot of guys don't get. They go around as posers their whole life because they're afraid to be humiliated. And go to another guy and say, can I sit in the shade of your mango tree? Like, it's a little bit humbling, bro. You don't want to do it. And then you know what that guy's going to do? He's going to deflate your pride. You know why? Because you showed up in that to that work site with the gloves on, you got your working belt on, brought all your tools. You're trying to act like you know what you're doing. We always are. We're always acting like we're a little bit better than we are. And then when you have to say, like, I don't know how to do it, you're going to say, can you speak up? I didn't hear you the first time. And that's actually, like, we think they're being mean. That's actually what a job the man is. I'm going to humble you down. You need to know what you don't know. You need to understand you are a fool when it comes to this. Now, you might have trauma where that's, you're saying I'm garbage because of other things. But as a man, getting recharged and coming out of the haven from the right way, your response should be like, you're right. I showed up here like I really know how to do this. I don't. I'm asking you, and I'm like, I'm trying to figure out how to not look like a loser while I'm asking. I should just come up and be like, dude, I don't know. And you'll see it. The more a man is mature in this area, the better he is at going to people and saying, I don't know how to do this. Will you teach me? And because why? He leads with humility. It's the lesson from Proverbs. Pride goes before the fall. A man begins to learn on the training field, stop being so prideful. Right? You go out, you play baseball, and that's part of sportsmanship, right? Stop being prideful, man. It's not going to lead to a good place. And what? Humility goes before honor. Humble yourself. Take the least seat at the table. God will move you up when you're ready. You start getting that inside of you. You'll humble yourself up under somebody. And maybe halfway through, they realize, oh, you know what? You're kind of better than me in this area, and they move you up a little bit. They go, no, man, I had problems with that too. And you know what? You're better at this part than I am. All of a sudden, you find yourself at equal level, but not by competition, by opening your heart and connecting. I've seen a lot of guys struggle with this. Why? Because their father wasn't that guy. They never learned it appropriately, and they have the same problems with God. They just can't come to God and really learn. They're too ashamed to admit how much they don't know. And they don't even realize they thought, no, I don't have a problem there. It's like, dude, you're not going as deep with those conversations with God as you should. When it starts touching that area, I'll see you later when the job's done, and then you go fail the job. And then you come back. And you know what? You don't see it. Why? Because God isn't the daddy when you come back. He's trying to be the mom at that point because you're so broken. He goes, I got to remind this kid that he's not garbage. But sometimes, as soon as we're recharged, I'm ready to do it again. It's like, okay, let me talk to you about what you know. No, I got it. And you're right back out, and you're just stuck in a cycle. Why? Because you're not learning the training ground either. These are separate areas. In the training ground, you learn three things, like I was saying. You learn to engage the problem. A lot of guys are stuck right there. They just can't engage. It just overwhelms them. They shut down. They run and they hide. They've been humiliated too many times. And they just need to go back to God and say, all right, this is worse. Living like this is worse. I want to learn how to engage. But God will just start throwing you out into crazy situations. Just teaching you that courage is a good thing. Just jump. Just jump. You have a kid that's terrified. You just got to jump, bro. You just hype them up, and then you get them to jump. I remember going with some relatives of mine, little boys, going to the water slides, and climbing the ladder to the top of the water slide. You get at the top, and the kid's just shaking like a leaf, and he's like, I think I'm going to go back down. I'm like, don't do it, bro. Just look at him in the eye. You're going to feel like a wiener all day long if you walk down those stairs. Until the moment you come back up here and you go through it. I know it's going to scare the crap out of you, but all you have to do is sit in that inner tube until it goes right past that line. And then you're going on this thing whether you want to or not. And at the bottom, I guarantee you will feel good about yourself for doing that. I remember looking one of them, and I just hit like right here in the stomach. You know where that fear is? And I just patted them like, that can be fear or it can be excitement. What do you want it to be right now? Just grab onto it. It's like the Warriors. Just do it, man. And that muscle, it doesn't get stronger except by exercise. You just do it again and again. I'm afraid. And God's, do it. And you do it. And it breaks a little bit. And you start finding that courage. You start getting to feel that engagement. You start being the guy who jumps in instead of fades back. You got it inside of you. It's just like Gideon in the Bible, right? Gideon in the Bible just had someone, he just needed a dad who would push him out into the fight sometimes. You got it, boy. Don't be afraid of getting hit. Get out there. You do it a couple of times, all of a sudden he realizes, I'm good at this. I come alive at this. He starts having that warrior wake up inside of him. When your dad looks at you and says, maybe you shouldn't. Kind of soft. kind of weak. You know, maybe you should go with your mom. Maybe you should just go hang out with mom. I don't know. You know what that does? I'd rather you hit your kid than do that. Than shelter him, like he's a little weak, pathetic thing that can't handle life. Just look at him like, I don't know. If you've ever experienced where your dad, you know the look when your dad gave up on you. Just in his eyes, he was just like, he doesn't have what it takes. There's nothing worse than that. Because he's the one who's supposed to be training you. And the one who's supposed to be training you goes, never mind. You should find something else to make your life about, because it's not going to be this. That's a spear in your heart that only your heavenly Father can take out when he goes, he was a freaking jerk when he did that. He was wrong. I hated when he did that. That was about his garbage, and he let it bleed on you, and it was never supposed to be that way. And he pulls that thing out and he says, we'll fix it though. Let's get back to it. He underestimated you. He couldn't see past his own brokenness to see your strength. He couldn't never see the gold in you. He couldn't look at it and say, well, one day I hope to sit in the shade of my son's tree. He had to keep you a little crushed little broccoli sprout over there to make himself feel like a big man. That's not what it's supposed to be. You should hunger for the day when you're an old man and all you can do is sit in the shade of your son's tree. Say, thank God for this kid. Thank God for this man. You know, we should want that. Some of us are so broken and insecure we can't handle it. God forbid, right? I pray I do better, you know? I think every father does, right? Don't let me screw up like that. God will call us into engagement, and then he'll teach us some very basic things. You get your son out there, the first thing is just get him out there. Get that warrior heart that he runs out. And then you go, okay, son, after you're stretching out, now I have to teach you discipline. You know, I was running off half-cocked. You got the strength. You're ready to roar at the problem. That's the first. Now we're going to teach you how to use the strength. How do you do it? Discipline. Remember that scene in Braveheart where the kid tries to pick up his uncle's sword? His dad just got killed and picks up the sword and he goes, first I'll teach you how to use this, and then I'll teach you how to use that. Right? That's what God will do in the situation. He'll say, I'm going to teach you. And it's always going to be simple little steps. Discipline. It's not a bunch of hard, it's not some big heroic step. It's a little step. And he goes, but you need to be faithful every day, in season and out, to do what I'm telling you to do. And you'll become better. You'll master this thing. That training field, that dojo, it's a place of mastery, man. Something happens to you when you meet God on that place day after day. It doesn't seem like much. You join a baseball team, you can't throw a ball to save your life. You go out on the training field, man, you don't play games on the training field. You don't win games on the training field, man. You just freaking run, bro. You run until you taste blood in your mouth. And then you do push-ups and squats until you can't walk, until your legs are rubber. You throw a ball like 10 feet back and forth. Catch that thing, throw it again. Catch it, throw it again. Stand in front of a pitching machine and just keep hitting it. Why? They're just grinding it into you. But you know what? You get 2 weeks into a training, all of a sudden you go, man, I can see myself getting better. I can feel it. The confidence, the skill. I'm growing in this place. It's what God wants to do in our lives. Can you imagine after most people, I can tap into some like pee-wee baseball memory and connect with that. At minimum, something like that. Played a little bit of sport in your life at some point, even if it was just pickup games of basketball, somebody like, yeah, I remember how it felt to get better. I can take that and say, imagine if that was your marriage. Imagine if that was you as a father. Imagine if that was with the call of God upon your life, where you were seeing yourself getting better. It's some fire, man. It put fire in your bones, I guarantee it. God teaches us discipline. Part of discipline that is underemphasized is what I call the love of the game. You know what the love of the game is? It's when you're not achieving any goals externally that anyone would respect, but you're still having a great time. That's the love of the game. You ever go fishing with somebody and go, man, I love fishing. I love fishing more than I love catching fish. And you go, oh, this guy's got it. Because he could go out there and he could fish all day and catch nothing. But he's like, man, I know I got a little bit better today. I rolled that cast just perfect. I didn't catch anything, but man, it was good. I had a couple of those perfect moments where I was touching the edge of God's power to become better at whatever I put my hand to. And I was doing it, and God was smiling, saying, get it, son, get it. And I could feel it inside of me. The love of the game. You go out there and you play golf, and it's not even that you didn't beat the other guys. You didn't even beat your score last time. You're 2 strokes behind what you did on Saturday. But there were a couple of moments where you did better. Maybe nobody else even saw them, but you felt yourself growing. You're like, yeah. That's what it's about. I call it the love of the game, but it's what keeps people in discipline, because you can't maintain discipline through victory and say, oh, I'm going to have enough victories where people stand up and cheer for me that's going to keep me going. No, it has to be an internal register that you're growing, that God's smiling upon it, because you go through long stretches where nothing flashy ever happens. There's nothing flashy about, working on the fundamentals of your game at like a baseball training camp you're just doing. Nothing looks that good there. And maybe be a long time before God puts you into a game and you actually hit a winning home run or something, and you actually get to see the skill in play. But the love of the game is what maintains you. When nobody sees you and you're just working away at something. Working away at patience. You know what? Patience, working on your patience, it's not one of those things where people do grandstand applause. Look at how patient this guy is. People don't even notice when you're doing it right. But you can see it. Say, I would have blown up. A year ago, I would have blown up when that happened. But God has done something inside of me. We're training and we're growing in it. And I'm figuring myself out. Discipline, the love of the game. Engagement is the first. Discipline, love of the game is the second. And then the third lesson is probably the hardest lesson for a father to teach his son. And that is that failure is not the finish line. It's not your enemy. It's a stepping stone. You're going to fail, and you're going to fail, and you're going to fail some more. To teach a kid to walk into a situation and almost expect it. It's going to happen. I'm going to get knocked down, and I'm going to have to get back up. I'm going to get knocked down, and I'm going to have to get up again. Get knocked down and get back up again. And a lot of, when I was talking about these guys, you see guys on a work site like this, they're not prepared. They walk onto a work site with their belt on. They've never fitted a pipe in their life. And they walk in there and they really don't expect to fail and get humbled. They really don't expect anybody to laugh at them. And the moment that it happens, I remember being with this young guy, it was actually in Africa, and his mom was kind of like, hey, take him out and show him some things. And I don't know a lot, but I said, okay. And so I handed this kid some nails and a hammer, and he put this like whack-a-mole. He wasn't even, I think he hit the nail one time and then he bent it over. So, it was just like, okay, let's take a step back, And it's like, if you're not prepared for humiliation, when you step out into, I'm going to fail and people are going to laugh at me, then you will be stuck at that place. There's a lot of people like, oh, I'm ready for failure. Yeah, you're ready for failure right up until the point someone's laughing at you. Then you're not ready for it anymore. But that's part of it. And you'll see a young man, you know when a young man's on the right path, because you can walk into that situation. He could be like, yeah, my dad never taught me how to swing a hammer. And he tries to swing a hammer and it's garbage, bro. And everybody goes, oh my God, did you see? Hey, Larry, get over here. This kid can't even hit. And everybody freaking laughs at you. And you know what? You laugh at yourself. You laugh at the failure because you know it's not the end. This isn't where my life ends. This isn't the end of it. This is the first step. This is my first failure. This is my first failure on this. I knew there was going to be one. The first time everybody looked around and said, this guy doesn't know what he's doing. I knew that was going to happen eventually. See, if you're really prepared for it, then you know what? You just humble yourself and you laugh along with it, but you keep showing up. You go, okay, here's my starting point. Sucking so bad that people laugh at me about it. That's where I'm starting. And you go ahead, guys, take a picture of this. So you have something to compare to later. And eventually, when you're the guy that can just boom, 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 hit 7 nails in without even looking, then people go, man, I remember when that kid couldn't even hit a nail. You see how he framed out that door? I knew when he couldn't even hit a nail straight. Yeah. What happens? Pride comes before the fall. You walk into that situation, you think you deserve honor for not being able to hit a nail in straight? No, bro, you deserve to be laughed at. That's the truth. It might not be your fault that your dad didn't teach you, but it's still not anything that's honorable that you don't know, right? You know that. You get to a certain age, you're like, I should know this. It sucks that my dad didn't teach me, but it's kind of on me now that I've been too afraid to go and ask somebody this whole time. Now I got to do it, and I'm going to have to eat some humble pie. That's what's going to happen. I'm going to have to get humbled down to the level of the 6-year-old kid who at that late. I should have learned this when I was 6 years old. I'm 25 years old. Guess what? I'm going to have to be treated like a 6-year-old for a little bit to learn it. Because that's where I should have learned it. You don't know, you got to get humbled back there. And then what happens? Well, that humility goes before honor. The problem is people get humbled, they run away. They don't say, I am on the path to honor right now. This is the path. You get humbled. That's how you grow into honor. Most young men, they just run. Everybody laughed at them, look quick to walk away from the job. I'm not putting up with this crap. Got no respect, bro. What were you? Respect is earned, man. It's ability and responsibility together. You didn't have the ability. That's a fail. But you have the responsibility to show up and learn. And people will honor that. Man, you might suck, but you show up every day. Like you can show up, let's say at a real dojo, you try to fight somebody and you're just like, and you hit them, you do the hammer fist. Yeah, it's not a good look. You try, everyone will laugh at you. But if every time you get punched in the face and knocked on the ground, you get up at hammer fist again, 10 or 8 times, you're all bloody, you just keep popping up, they'll go, wait a minute, this kid's got heart. Why? You might have no ability, but man, you got the responsibility. That's how you get respect. It's ability and responsibility come together. That's respect. If you don't have the ability, you better have the responsibility. You better show up and say, I'm ready to learn. That's how you earn it. Most kids never learn that. There are kids today, you see it all the time. It's so rare. Like I'll be around young men in my family and other places, they never learned it. They've been hiding behind a screen their whole life. They're uncomfortable to have a phone call with somebody. I'll just text them. Like you've never really put yourself out there. And they're not ready for failure. They're not really ready for humiliation. They don't have a tough enough skin. It's like, of course you don't. You don't get calluses while you're wearing rubber gloves full of lotion. You gotta go out there and rough your hands up, man. You learn how to play the guitar. Your fingers are going to freaking feel like they're bleeding, man. There's nothing for it but to keep playing until they toughen up. The calluses will build up in time. At first, man, you think, I will never survive this humiliation. But if you have a good father there, he'll say, son, keep your head up. Don't own that like it's you. They're laughing at your failure, not you. And one day, you'll laugh at this failure. Maybe not right now, but you'll look back and you'll laugh right now. And eventually, you'll be at a place where you'll be able to laugh at the failure while it's happening because you have such confidence that I'm going to be above this sin. You'll be able to laugh at the beginning. But right now, just trust me. And that's where a good father points, go run your mama for a second. And then come back and talk to me. And I'll point you on the path, but you need to recharge. God will do the same thing. Let's not talk about this right now. Let me just tell you about who I see inside of you. And he'll take the sting out of the rejection and he'll fill your tank. And then when you're restabilized, then he'll turn the conversation back to you and say, look, of course you're going to fail. You don't know how to do this. It's not poison. You can handle it. It's actually good for you. Get your arms around it. Fail harder, bro. Throw yourself into it. You will be amazing. This is where you become a man. It's actually, that's what I'm saying. Like a lot of us, we're trying to shape our son into something. What we're supposed to do is give him the tools to shape himself into whatever God points him at. It's like he just needs to be a man at whatever he does. That's your job, to teach him this. Whatever God puts before you, son, you engage, you work with discipline, you love it for the journey, and you don't run away when you fail. You double down, you embrace the humility until you find the honor in it. Whatever God puts you on, you engage with it like that. Sometimes we're so stuck on, I want him to follow this, I want to follow that one day when our son looks at us and, Dad, that's not what I'm supposed to do. I'm supposed to do this, and he points in that direction. You go, I don't know anything about that. I can't teach you to do that. I can't teach you to be a pastor. I'm not a pastor. In reality, God just taps you and says, look, that's not what you're Your job is never supposed to teach him anything like that. Your job is to teach him how to be a man. You look at a situation you know nothing about. It's like Jethro teaching Moses about something. Jethro didn't know anything about Moses' calling, being a prophet, being the leader of people, all this. But Jethro could look at the situation and say, you're not handling this like a man. You can delegate here, son. You're going to do this the right way. You're going to burn yourself out. You don't have a limitless tank here, son. Let's work this out. Wisdom's wisdom. A lot of times we fall into, it's kind of an echo of the wound. If the haven screwed up, you'll sometimes get an echo effect in that training field place. If your problem's pride, like if you recharge your atmosphere with pride, like that's where you charge up, and then you go to work with pride inside of you. Like you didn't get into a place of peace with God, or you're cool with who you are. No, you told yourself this story that you're better than who you are, and then you go to work with that. You're going to keep lying. You lied to charge yourself up. You prided yourself up. Then you go out there and what you're trying to manufacture fake fruit. That's what you're trying to do. And eventually that stuff's going to blow up in your face. And it's going to be a hard crash. And you're not going to learn anything in that process. You can't learn anything by lying to yourself. That's humility is the beginning of that learning process. You'll avoid the situations that will teach you things. Because you're just trying to get to the success. I need to make the fruit to hold up this thing. I've been telling everyone this story. I've been telling myself this story that I'm great, and then I got, now I have to be great. And so you can't own the humility and learn from your mistakes. You can't actually grow to greatness because you're always trying to jump over the humility and the learning to get to the other side. Why? Because you started out in pride. That's where, again, you have to learn that lesson. Let your father deflate your pride. Let him humble you. Make friends with the humble path. It's what gets you to the honorable place. The other thing is if you recharge yourself in a haven of pity, that's what you, oh, poor me, and you just like feel sorry, get yourself into a place where you can indulge in whatever your little passion is, on your little addiction is on the side. Then what happens when you step out into the place of work where you're supposed to work? Is this thing slipping off? Sorry, I didn't wear the right shirt for this. My little, was it a Tribble in Star Trek? But if you step out from a place of pity, then what you're going to do is you're going to actually pursue failure, and you're just going to flavor it with pity. So you're never really going to be aiming at success. You're going to be aiming at, I made a diligent effort and I failed, or I knew I was going to fail, and you're like meditating on failure as you go into it. And then the first thing you're like, I knew it. I knew this was going to happen. I told you I wouldn't do it. And that's always feeding back into that. You're not aiming at success because success isn't going to get you back in a mama's lap. Failure leads to pity that leads back to your haven. So your haven is, the haven's going to dictate that. But if you come from a place of peace where God has you, then it's honest and it's peaceful. So you can walk forward into the situation and say, I don't know Jack. I can face what I know and what I don't know. I can face the fact that, I'm going to get humbled. And you know what? I'm not, I'm not this prideful picture, so I can handle the humility. Being put in my place, that's cool because I know what my place is. Like, I am like a 6-year-old. I don't know how to swing a hammer. You can be humbled back into that place, but you're not chasing after pity either because you're at peace. I'm worth it. It's not shameful that I don't know how to do this. This is where I'm at. God's cool with it. He's working from where I am. He's meeting me here and leading me forward. And so you're at peace with that. If you come from that peaceful place in the haven and then you engage in that training ground, what you'll experience is it's a guy who's fighting for fruitfulness. He's fighting for it. It's a struggle. He knows he's not going to just bring. The prideful guy is just like expecting it to come to him on a silver platter. He's entitled. Look, behold. He wants the respect and the honor like he's already accomplished all the things. He hasn't accomplished anything. The pitiful guy, he doesn't fight at all. His first punch that gets done, he just runs away. My nose, I think I taste blood. And he's out. But the guy that's got that peaceful heart, he can maintain the fight. And then the fruit's small, he doesn't despise it because he's like, that's where I am. I'll count that win. I'll celebrate it. That's what we need. And we can look at our life, we can look at that. We can honestly, first of all, just say, is that real? Is there a place where I'm letting God sharpen me? And he might be so restricted that you're not pursuing anything, that it's just whatever your responsibility is. I have to do this. I have to be a dad and a father. I have to go and make some money for my family. He might be constrained to those areas because you just don't engage. Outside of that, you're just, a hedonist. You're just chasing pleasure and relaxation. You're not pursuing anything for the sake of just self-improvement, of growing. You don't have a lot of engagement. So you have to look at that. But then if you have an area like that, and maybe it's just a responsibility that you have, but you can look at it and say, what am I? Am I a guy who lies about my fruit? Or am I a guy who seasons my failure with pity to make it, oh, look at me? Or am I fighting to grow? Because fighting to grow, it's very obvious, man. If you see somebody just walking in a humble place without pity, that guy's fighting. If he can face his fruit, he can face what's really going on. He's not lying, that's pride, and he's not seasoning it with pity. He's just right in the middle learning from it. He's got peace with who he is from God, and he's facing the situation as it is. That guy's going to get better. He's going to grow. And the more he grows, the more satisfaction and power he's going to feel in his growth. His skill is going to develop. His confidence is going to develop. And if he's letting God point him at those things, it doesn't matter what they are. It doesn't matter. God could say, learn Japanese. You're like, I don't know anybody who speaks Japanese. And you know what? It wouldn't matter. Because God teaches you something, you don't know where it's leading. You don't know why he's teaching you this thing. He's teaching you about prayer. He's having you read a book about this. It might not connect with your life at all as far as you can see. But you know what? It doesn't matter. If your blade is getting sharpened, it's going to be such a fuel to you. It's going to bless you in such a deep way. The third chamber of the heart, and it almost sounds complete, right? You got the haven, and you got the training field. And it's kind of like two legs, They're not equal. In the beginning, you're going to spend more time in the haven, less time on the training field, just like a little boy. You can't handle too much training. And then eventually it flips. You're spending very little time in the haven, but you still need to go. Your tank capacity is increased, but you still got to go and get your tank filled up. But it kind of almost seems on its own, like, okay, I have times where I go and get recharged, and I have times where I'm growing and I'm bettering myself in God. And it really seems like almost balanced in itself, but it's not. It'll fall apart. Why? Because there's more than two chambers of the heart, right? The third chamber is, you could call it a couple different things. We could call it destiny. We could call it your story. We could call it your journey. But what it's speaking to is that a man needs a mission. He could be training all day long, but a warrior needs a war. A warrior needs a mission. He needs a master. Otherwise, what is he? He's just a mercenary. And who is his master? Money. You'll see guys like that. They're all about self-improvement. They're growing in things. They probably don't have the right haven in that situation. They're probably not going to God. But they'll have something like balance, They have some peaceful thing they're plugging into, and they're constantly working on themselves. But what? They're like a Warren Buffett. They're just out there. I'm growing a business. I'm making money. Their goal is what? I'm going to get a boat and a vacation home or whatever. I'm going to have a big college funds for my kid. It might sound better than that stuff. And you can hear people, I hear this all the time with like artists and stuff. They hit a certain level. Now I'm giving back to my community, and I'm building parks in the ghetto, and they're doing these things trying to build up a legacy. Why? Because they feel that hole, but they don't have a destiny. They've just been chasing a goal. They don't have a calling. And at some point, as your life, and you get into your life, you're going to realize my story doesn't have a story. It's like a movie full of action, but there's no plot line. You're just wandering. What is this guy's goal? What is he trying? I don't know what my goal is. Survival, I guess. Don't screw up. That's not a good plot line for your story. There's a journey, there's a calling. There has to be something that is greater than you making up a purpose for yourself. And as crazy as it seems, this happens in Christianity all the time, where people, they bumped into their destiny and it's freaked them out so bad they ran away from it, or they never found it in the first place. And so they're just separated from that sense of destiny. And it's very, go ahead and crack it, bro. It's not going to bother me. And it's hot in here. You got to hydrate, bro. I don't want you passing out on me. What did we do? Just keep going. No, like Paul raised someone from the dead when they passed out, but I wouldn't rely on that. I don't think I'm there yet. Maybe. You know. Sorry about that, bro. I'm just kidding. But if you don't have a journey, like if your life doesn't have a story that makes sense to you, like God has called me and I'm here on this journey. Like Moses was like, he knew, God's like, I'm going to send you into Egypt, you're going to lead these people out and you're going to take them to the promised land. Like he didn't understand that it was going to take 40 years in the desert. There was a lot of surprises along the way, but he had a sense of what the purpose of his life was. He had a sense of destiny, right? It's essential to a man. If a man doesn't have a sense of destiny, he just feels meaningless, purposeless, and directionless. He's just a mercenary. What am I working for? I just sit in a cubicle all day. That life of quiet desperation is, it will eat you alive if you don't have that chamber of your heart filled with destiny. It's important. Now, that might not immediately click with you, destiny, but if you start looking at people that have a wrong relationship with destiny, you'll go, oh, I know that guy, because it's either you or it's somebody you know. If you start talking to a person about their destiny, and they will even admit that they have some sense of it, they're going to fall into two camps. One is the deedless dreamer. That's the guy, he's embraced his destiny, like up here, but he doesn't do anything about it. He's just dreaming about it, right? Like, yeah, one day I'm going to have a huge ministry, or one day I'm going to restore classic cars. Or, he's got a dream. I'm going to become a doctor. I'm this, but like, no. Like I knew a guy in high school, smoked a ton of weed, and he had dreams about being a professional skateboarder. I knew like 10 guys that were like this actually. But you hang out at a skate park just to buy weed. That's why I was there. I didn't skateboard. I was there for the drugs. That was where I was in that season of my life. There's a whole bunch of people with what? A pipe dream, right? Literal pipe dream. They're smoking weed. Yeah, one day, and it's like, no, bro. A real skater would stop freaking smoking weed and actually learn how to do this well. You can't, but what? The dream isn't actually there to get them there. The dream is to make it more palatable to be here. You're just using the fantasy to feel better about the fake fill that chamber of your heart that says, I don't have any meaning or purpose. You go, yes, one day I'm going to be the next Tony Hawk. And it's a lie. You're not pursuing it. But it's a lie that helps you deal with here, but it doesn't actually help you get anywhere. That's not the same thing, but it's close enough that it's a counterfeit. Like I said, most times you'll find people in one camp or another. It's either the deedless dreamer or it's the despairing druggie. The despairing druggie is a guy and most of the time you find somebody who they struggle with like depression, despair, like what is the meaning of my life? And then they dive into it doesn't have to be a substance. I say druggie, but there's a lot of different things you could drug yourself up with. It could be pornography, it could be some sort of little achievements. You could be like a driven person, like, man, this guy's really working his way through the company. Guess what? It wasn't his dream to be in the company, bro. This is he settled for this. This was his safety pick. He don't want to do this. He wants to be going out. He wants to be an actor, but he chose to do this because it was safe. And he's driving hard because maybe succeeding here will cover up the hole over there. But there's a desperation to it. There's why? Because he's the coward who ran away from his call. You can see it on somebody in that situation. One way or the other, they're trying to hide from destiny, and they're trying to hide from how ashamed they are of themselves, that they ran away from it, how heavy that burden is. And so they go into that drug place. I need something to numb me out, to distract me, to hide from the fact I ran away from the fight I was born to fight. That's not a good feeling as a warrior, to run away and hide in the bushes when the battle starts. That's not. So it's either the two. Either there's a guy who never went to the battle. He's just sitting in the bar with his sword talking about, oh, I'm a great warrior, but he's never done it. Or it's the guy, he went all the way to the edge of it and then he ran away, and now he's trying to pretend something else is his destiny because he can't face the fact he ran away from it over here. Those are some of the biggest braggarts you'll ever find. Like, oh yeah, you know. It's like if you meet a military guy, a veteran, he never stops talking about it, pretty good chance he never did it. You bump into somebody who knows him, all of a sudden you get a whole other story about what he did over there. He wasn't involved in it. You find somebody who actually did some heroic stuff, they probably never talk about it, right? It's because it's the same thing. It's the pride. It's the lie. Trying to make yourself look good in that situation. Or it's the pity. I'm just going to go drug myself up. Poor me for running away. Poor me for giving up on myself. My dream. And so you just go and pour yourself another glass. And it's self-indulgent, but it looks like, oh man, poor guy, but really you're doing it to yourself, right? The third kind is the right kind, and that's the daring disciple. And when you look at this as a young man, there'll be a time, like if everything was perfect, your mother's a haven, your father is a good instructor. He's training you up in how to be a man. But you don't really have any direction in what kind of man you're going to be. Maybe you just kind of adopt your dad's mission for a while because you just don't have one of your own. Maybe you see a cool movie, firefighter, whatever. You don't have a sense of calling. It's just whatever grabs your fancy. You might be switching it out all the time. Whatever's catching you at the moment. Then there's a moment where you get a call. And I think everybody gets one. Maybe they don't figure out what it is, but that sense of calling comes upon you. Right around puberty, usually it starts grabbing you. Something starts connecting. Sometimes there's a false start. It depends on how well you're guided. Because if you're just a dumb kid doing it on your own, you might connect that feeling with the wrong thing. This resonates with my call. It's not really my call, but it's the closest thing I found. You grab onto it. You know? You know, it just locks on. But if you have a good community and they're training you up and they're pushing you towards God, they're teaching you how to connect with God, then it can be really clear. You have a real powerful sense of destiny. God really outlines, this is what I've called you to. Sort of a Jeremiah 1 kind of moment. You're like, okay, from the womb, I'm called to do this. And you can see it. You don't have, again, it's like Moses. You don't have all the details, but you know, I'm here to set these people free. That's what my job is. Don't know how I'm going to do it. Don't know really what the next step is even, but this is what it is. And what tends to happen in that situation is we're very focused on us and not so focused on the guy who's calling us. You get called and you're young, you focus on you. I'm called to be a pastor. What do you focus on? I'm a pastor. You're like me and what I'm going to do. And you're thinking very little about the guy who's calling you to it, which is weird because that's the whole point, right? Why would you do something you're called to do? Because the guy who called you to do it's important to you. I called up Danny and said, hey, Danny, make me a milkshake. He wouldn't be like, milkshake, yes, and just be so focused on a milkshake. He'd go, why should I make Philip a milkshake? And you'd have to decide, am I a person that you're like, okay, yeah, he's a good friend of mine. I'm going to make it, you know what? He's done a lot of nice things for me. I'm going to make that guy a milkshake. And then, yeah, make a milkshake, be freaking artist in the kitchen, sprinkle rosemary or some crazy zesty herb on it. Like, well, that doesn't seem like, ooh, wow, savory milkshake. Has this ever been invented? But, you know, you could go way outside the box. Wow. But you wouldn't do it and just be like, oh yeah, it's just something for me to jump onto. I was barely cognizant of who was calling me. But it's weird, as a young man, even young in Christ, and you get a calling. It's amazing how little it's about the guy who called you and how much it is about the fact that you're called. I'm important. Somebody called me. And it is. It fills the chamber of your heart. It's not weird that you're distracted by that. It's just a little immature to stay there. So that's why when you see somebody who's developed in their calling, that chamber of their heart's working, what the main thing you see is that they're a disciple. They have a relationship with the guy who called them. It's not, the focus isn't really on what they're doing. Yeah, that's happening, but it's strange how much it's focused on the fact that that relationship with the one who called them. Most people that get called, they run out and they try to do it without God. It's weird, right? He created you to do something. He created that situation for you. He's setting it all up. He tells you that you're called to do it, and then you run off without him instead of saying, okay, God, what's the next step? How do I get ready for this? How do I grow? I think in a lot of ways, David was one of those guys who kept the focus on God. And God's like, okay, David, go to work as a shepherd, and I'll start teaching you. And you think, man, I'm supposed to be king? Yeah, David, be king over these sheep. You imagine probably early on, he's trying to boss the sheep around. That's not what it means to be a king, David. You've got to care for the sheep. You need to lay down your life for them. Gradually, but there was a day when all the soldiers in the kingdom were afraid to face Goliath, but David wasn't. Why? Because he had been trained how to fight as a shepherd. And he already had more of a king's heart than Saul did. Why? Because he let God teach him in the place where he was at. He was what? He was a daring disciple. He let God stretch him and cause God push him to invest, step up, try this thing, do this thing, take the next step in your business, push on this. And what? His focus was not on what he was doing as much as, okay, God, what's this step? Okay, and then I do it. Daring disciple, over and over again. And that's how you walk in destiny. You walk in it hand in hand with the one who calls you. It's equally about connection with him as it is with connection on the ground. You're actually doing what he's asking you to do. If it's all this, then this isn't probably even real. This is more of the pipe dream. Just talking to God about things, and God's like, okay, do it, and I ignore that, and I just keep thinking about it. Because there's going to be an action step in there. There's 3 lessons that we really learn when it comes to that chamber of the heart, the journey chamber, the destiny of the warrior. And it's this. The first lesson is that God is greater. There will be a season in your life, especially if you're developing in these ways. You're finding peace in resting in God as a haven. You're sharpening yourself. You're growing in the areas God's calling you to grow in. And there'll become a moment when you start getting very disquieted in your life. Because you'll look around and say, what the hell is this for? It's kind of like we're circling in the desert, God, and yeah, we're getting good at these different things. I can see that you're training us with the manna and waiting for the manna, praying for this. You're using us in these little skirmishes with the Amalek. I see you preparing us for something, but what is the purpose of it all? There'll be a disquiet there. That will exist. But over there, there's an even stronger layer at the back of it where you just realize, like, what's the point of anything? What's the point of life? We're all going to die anyways. What is, it's a disquiet that comes upon the whole thing. And I the best way, it's really kind of a mystical kind of thing, but the best way I can boil it down is that verse in Scripture that says, all flesh is but grass, and all the glory of a man but the flower of a field. And the grass withers and the flower falls, but the word of God endures forever. And that's looking at you're looking at human beings, you're looking at men living their lives, and you're saying flesh, all mankind was just like blades of grass, man. We're here today and we're mowed down tomorrow. And a glorious man who does something really amazing in his life, it's like a little dandelion that pops up in the lawn. It's kind of pretty, but believe me, when I mow it down, somebody comes out, they're not even going to miss it. They're not even going to, where was that dandelion? They're not even remembering that it was there in the first place. What are we? We're but a vapor. Here today, gone tomorrow. And our great-great-great-grandchildren won't even know our names, let alone what we did. And if people remember you 200 years later, they're going to be remembering you like we remember George Washington. Like he had wooden teeth and would not tell a lie, and all this stuff's made up and isn't true. It's just a mixture. We don't know who that guy is anymore. And there's a part of you that looks out. It's like what it says. What does it say in Ecclesiastes? The preacher says, for everything there's a season, and he's describing this cyclic way of life, and it gets meaningless after a while. Born, grow up, die. Born, grow up, die. Born, grow up, die. There's a cycle. For everything there's a season. You go, yeah, I get it. It's monotonous. There's this happens, and then this happens, and this happens again. But what does it say? There's a season for everything, but God has set eternity in the hearts of men. There's something in your heart that cries out for what isn't here, that cries out for something that's beyond this life. And that's exactly where you begin to taste destiny, because that's exactly where you begin to meet God. It's in that place where you go, this life is not enough for me. I could get all the money I want, I could chase all the women I want, I could go through all these things, and everything becomes a meaningless cycle. There's something beyond, something greater planted in my heart that cries out for what's just on the other side of this veil of life. And it's right there where you're leaning in. You're like a little boy, you're 13 years old, and you feel this pull. There's something more. There's something more. You begin to hear the whisper. What's the whisper? It's the voice of God that does not fade, that does not fall, that is not mowed down. It stands forever. And he begins to talk about you, and he begins to talk about why you're here. And all of a sudden you go, this is eternal. What men invent for themselves, the glory that they raise up, it's nothing. It's nothing. But this voice that cannot die, this voice that's unshakable, that shakes the world, it speaks and it comes into being. This voice speaks of me. It speaks over me. It calls me. And when I step into it, I become one with it. You go, this is what it's about. This is how I put meaning into my life. I follow this voice. That's what calling is all about. It's not even about what it's calling us to do. It's the fact that he, the eternal one, is calling us to do something, and we join with his eternal purpose, and it pulls us up out of the meaninglessness of what we invent for ourselves, what we decide out of some tickle of our flesh. Now I'm walking in the eternal purpose of God, and there's something there, something powerful and vibrant when you're fulfilling the purpose God created you to fulfill. No matter what it is, he could have you mop toilets or something. It doesn't matter. The eternal God from eternal time planned this moment and put you in it. It doesn't matter what the moment is. What matters is that you're doing it. You're aligning with what he wants. And we can see that, right? Like when you raise a kid, you do something you're created to do. You hold your kid. You're showing up for your kid. I mean, if your life doesn't have any meaning because you're going to one day die, you could be like the Ecclesiastes, all is vanity, right? What is he saying? He's saying apart from God's intervention, this is a meaningless rat race and we all die. Where does it go? It's like the nihilistic thing of atheism. It's just all chaos and accidents, and we evolved from monkeys, and then it was an accidental explosion of the universe, and nothing really matters, and nothing's ever going to be remembered, and there's no purpose but what we invent, which means it's just a lie anyway. It's just a lie we tell ourselves to feel good. And the preacher in Ecclesiastes says, yeah, that's all true, except there is purpose. We just don't embrace it most of the time. There is a God crying out to try to turn us from our vanity. We just not interested most of the time. So if your life's vain, then really having a kid means nothing, right? Because then his life is vain. Everybody's life is vain. But when you step up and you start being a good father, there's heavy purpose in that. You feel it immediately. Why? Because God called you to that. You wouldn't have that kid in your arms if you didn't. And that's where you might not even believe in God, but you touch God right there. I'm not saying you're going to heaven because of it, far from it. But when you step up and you do something you were created to do, you're faithful to one woman, and you act like a man. You have a kid, and you be a father. You be a father to that kid. You step up in these little ways, and you start touching the edge of destiny. You're not even aware of where it is or where it comes from. It starts filling your life with heavy purpose. And you know you don't even understand the path, but I'm on the path. It's a powerful thing. We're supposed to have men around us at that age, 12, 13 years old, that are saying, something's going to start waking up in you soon. This feeling. It's like a mournful pull, and it's going to be pulling you into quietness. It's going to be pulling you away from the childhood games. It's going to be pulling you to think about heavy things like life and death and meaning and purpose. And if you will follow it, God will begin to whisper, and we're going to teach you how to hear and how to understand and how to catch a vision for what your life is about. We don't do that. We don't have vision quests for our kids. We don't even have bar mitzvahs for our kids. We're just like, whatever, play video games. And it deadens us. We end up with 18, 19, 20-year-old kids, and they're just wandering. They're following a path, a school, college thing. They're just following the path, and it just spills them out at some point, and they go, I don't know what I'm here for. It's because we never led them to the one who could tell them why they were created. It's not enough without it. You see, the first lesson that you learn in this season, you're supposed to be learning it directly from God, which is heavy. That's why it doesn't come until maybe your late teens. The first lesson is that God's voice is greater, that this is what it is. We need to follow the voice. It's the only thing that gives purpose to our lives. We turn away from him and invent our own purpose. It's just a lie. We've got to follow the voice of truth. That's the first thing. The second thing is we learn there's this huge difference between vision and a pipe dream. A lot of kids, and they never learn that. What's the difference between vision and a pipe dream? Let me be slightly crude here and say the difference between a vision and a pipe dream is the difference between a map and masturbation. Because what's the purpose of a map? The purpose of a map is to get you from here to somewhere else. What's the purpose of masturbation? To make you feel better about doing nothing. That's what it's about. If you want to marry a girl, you don't sit in a room and think about her and touch yourself. You go out and you talk to her. And you man up and you be a man and you show her that you're worth having. And then you ask her to marry you. You make a commitment and you build a life with her. Then you can actually have the woman for real. That's what a man does in that situation. What does a boy do? He touches himself so he feels better about doing nothing. That's the difference. And I mean, that's very crude, right? I understand it's crude, but I'm talking to guys here. I think we can get it. But that's the difference. A vision that God gives you is a map to get you somewhere. And I get, like, sometimes God has you circle in the desert, but waiting is always part of the journey. You're always training. You're going somewhere. It's not always a very straight path to get there. Sometimes it's a crooked road that God lays down because he knows the detours we need to train us. But you're always engaging with something real. You're always walking out something that God has called you to. And you can instantly recognize, I've perverted the vision of God into a dream, into a pipe dream. Because what? You have dreams while you're sleeping. If you want to have more dreams, what do? You have to roll over and go back to sleep to have them. How do you have a vision? You walk out into the desert. You push yourself for hard things. You fast and you pray and you push. That's how you get a vision. How do you have another dream? Roll over and go back to sleep. Do nothing. Lay there long enough and you'll fall asleep and you'll have another dream. That's how you start to sort it out. And really, if you had, men of God around you, they would very easily start pointing out fruit issues and say, this isn't really how a vision works. This is a dream. This is a fantasy. Obviously, it works very well at making you feel better about doing nothing, but that's not what visions of God usually do. A lot of times, what do? We try to replace the haven that has fallen off of us with that, with a false destiny, with a dream. And when I feel bad about myself, I go and think about my dream. I don't run to mama anymore. I go to my dream and I pleasure myself emotionally with the thought of greatness, and I'm just a deedless dreamer. I'm probably not even sharpening myself very much, and then I run back to that for my haven. That's not your haven. Your haven has nothing to do with what you do. Your haven has to do with who you are. It's God calling you back and talking about things that never change. It's the internal structure of your spirit, your hidden heart. It's your real character. It's who you are. God has no interest in the haven of talking to you about what you're doing in your life. He will shove that out and say, no, I'm talking about you. And when you go into the vision of what God's calling you into, it's the same way. He don't want to talk to you about who you are. He wants to talk to you about what you're called to do. It's a dad out in the field like, let's get to work. It is not, let's try to puff up your ego or resurrect some part of you that feels bad about yourself. Like when your calling starts getting mixed up with your ego, you know you're in bad shape. Now you want to see how these big guys that build big old ministries and Ravi Zacharias, that's how their ego and their calling got mixed together like they had something to do with each other. You should be fulfilled by that time with God where he looks at you. And then you should go from there and be able to walk out your destiny because it's what God has called you as your purpose in life. They're different. If you try to fill your emptiness with your future, It's dangerous, and it's not how you're designed to operate. It's not a good idea. Again, people tend to fall into those categories. They're a deedless dreamer, and then of course that's what you're supposed to learn. You're supposed to step out and you start trying to turn that the wrong way, and God's supposed to come in and whack you. And he probably did, probably hit you with some heavy truth the first time you tried to turn the map into masturbation, say that's not what that's for. So it's a question, maybe you're screwed up so much it didn't matter. It worked. It made me feel better, and you just kept doing it. Paved over the revelation of God there. But that's the lesson you're supposed to learn. The third lesson you're supposed to learn is it's better to face the truth and die from it than to live out a lie. That's the ultimate issue that a prideful person, and I hate to throw that term because I think it applies to a lot of us, but that's the lesson a prideful man refuses to learn. That's what the Pharisees refused to learn. Every guy that's out there trying to act big, and I've already figured it out, and I'm ready to go. Like every one of those guys, they have not learned the lesson. It would be better for you to face the humbling truth and be so humbled and be crushed and rejected and everything. It'd be better to live the truth, even if it killed you, than to live in a beautiful lie where everybody thinks you're cool. There's nothing worse than that. It's dishonorable. It's you hiding behind another identity. It's not really you. No matter how much people love it, it's not you, dude. It's an illusion. You're pancaking makeup on like a prostitute to try to make yourself attractive to other people, but it's not you. It's gross. It's wrong. But often we're on that path. So we grab onto our calling in God, and we're just trying to use it to inflate ourselves. Try to puff ourselves up, try to push us in a direction. But we know we're not walking in our call right. We can look at it very easily. Either our call is that dream we're using to titillate ourselves with, or guess what? We're chasing our call, but for some reason we're desperately broken and we have these addictions on the side. Why do you need those? Because that's not really your call. At least you're not lining up with it the right way. You're not walking the right path there. What you have to do is face up in that situation and say, if I'm going to step out into my journey, if I'm going to follow what God's going to do, guess what's going to happen? Humility. You're going to step out, you're going to obey God in your call. It's going to be a constant reality check in what you're capable of doing. And you are going to decrease and he's going to increase. That's why it's a daring discipleship, because that's what happens. God will call you to be a man. Then he will call you to be a man of God. Then he will call you to be a vessel of Christ. And then he will call you to be completely eclipsed by Christ. You shall decrease, he shall increase. There is nothing more crucifying. There is nothing more deadening than the truth. Nothing. My thing dying or something? No. The cameraman's jumping up.
So comments.
Hang on, let me transition. Men need a stronghold. They need a haven. They need that place of unshakable strength. And they need to grow. They need that training ground. They need to be growing in mastery. God needs to be teaching them things, and they need to be getting incrementally better all the time in something, even if other people can't see it. And a man needs a journey, a story about his life. God's like, this is what you're here to do. You don't know all the details, but you know that you're called to do it, and you're stepping out to do it. You're not playing with the idea. You're not boasting about things you're not really doing. You're actually doing it incrementally by daring, bold discipleship. You're stepping out there. You're obeying what God's telling you to do. You're following the vision. You're like, I don't know how this ever leads there, but I'll take the next step, and I'll take the next step, and I'll take the next step. And you think that's complete, but there's one last chamber of your heart. And that's the one I call the mystery. And I don't mean it's a mystery like figure out what it is. That's not what we know what it is. The original meaning of the word mystery isn't, here's a question, what's the answer? and you got to go find it. The original meaning of mystery was transcendence. When they talk about mysteries in Scripture, they're not talking about something that has an answer. They're talking about something the answer is obvious, we just don't understand it. It's a paradox because our brain can't wrap itself around it. When we talk about the Trinity, it's simple. The answer's right there. God is 3 persons, 1 God. It's right there. It just doesn't compute. We can't get it because our brains aren't strong enough. We're not powerful enough to hold it. And when we begin to touch eternity, when God begins to call us, there are things about that do not compute. It's a mystery. It's God talking to us about something, and we can't really figure out what it is, but we can interact with it just the same. And there is a part of life that is transcendent in that way. We begin to touch it as we begin our journey. We begin to touch God. We begin to touch He has a call on my life. And there's something about that. There's something about the taste of that as you're pushing in. There's something about the glory of that. When you start thinking about your life, you start thinking, if that really happened, if I really became the man God called me to be, if I really fulfilled my destiny, there's something there, and it's more than the sum of its parts. Because you add it up, you go, okay, I'm a great preacher, I preach great sermons, whatever your destiny is, I lead 1 million people to Christ. Whatever it is, you look at it, and you add it up, and it doesn't add up to that feeling. There's something else there. What is it? It's transcendent. It's something that reaches beyond the veil of existence as we know it. There's something beyond in it. And as a man, you begin to interact with this thing. And it's not that you ever really get your arms around it. You're reaching out in your destiny. You're pursuing God. And it's like you can't get your arms around it. You can't really communicate to anyone else what this thing is. But there's something about being what God has called me to be. There's something about walking the path He's called me to be. I can't put this thing in the words to communicate it to anything else, but it's the thing that makes my life the most worth living. Because at some point you're going to have like that Mount Nebo, like Moses, where all of a sudden you're like, the mission's over. I'm going home. You're like Paul, and he's saying, I'm about to die. It's over. I'm about to be poured out like a drink offering. But what awaits for me? The crown of life. What a metaphor. It's a metaphor. He's talking about something he can't even put words to this experience, but he can feel that crown out there. There's something God's about to give me. It's beyond, I don't care about anything in this life. I care about this thing. I can't even put into words what it is. It's like Peter, who could say, I groan to set aside the tent of this body, that I might be clothed with my heavenly dwelling place. He doesn't even have words for what it is. Paul says it again, right? I think it's in maybe Romans or Corinthians. I'm forgetting the verse. Excuse me. But he says, not even that we know what we're going to receive. We don't even know what we shall be when we see Him. We only know that we will be like Him and that we will know Him the way that He knows us. When we think about heaven, like people don't get excited about heaven, and it's not a mystery. We can't understand what it is. Like we can read stories, we can read like Revelation, and here's a gold city with the river, with the tree, the leaves heal the nations. It's like, but it's so metaphorical. And that's what happens with like a spiritual vision. Like someone could tell you, have a prophecy and tell you a vision, you go, It's like Jesus' parables, right? This guy sowing seed, you go, The metaphor, if all you get is the symbol and you don't understand what it represents, it's just a story. Threw some seed on the ground, some birds ate it. Oh no, guess he ran out of some seed. But when you are touching the spiritual reality, you can't explain what it means any better than anybody else can, but you understand what Jesus is talking about. When the seed is eaten, you weep inside you. It's lost. When they say, is there anyone who can break the 7 seals? And then the lamb that was slain before the foundations of the world appears, and the ecstasy. John didn't even know what he's trying to grasp something, but spiritually he knew what it was. He just didn't have words for it. Sometimes we're silent because we don't have anything to say. Sometimes we're silent because we have too much to ever express. And whatever we say is going to be too small. We stumble to tell somebody what it is. You hear Paul stumbling. I'm trying to take hold of him for the reason for which he took hold of me. Not that I think that I possess it, but I set everything behind me. I throw it all behind me as garbage that I might have it. He can't even really get out what the heck what it is. But the more he follows God, the more he feels it, the more he can taste it. There is something just behind that veil that washes out everything in this life. And I would give away even my destiny in this world to have that. I would walk away from the call in a moment, and I will. One day, God will say, that's enough, Enoch. You're not going home today. And I'll go, good. I get to see it. I get to step through the veil and see the thing. The thing I've only glimpsed that's called to my heart more than anything else in my life, that I can let go of this world and let trust you with everything I leave behind and step forward and have the thing. It's hard to explain the mystery. I think the best way to say it is that there is a home that you long for that you've never been to. And no matter what the dream, the imagination that you have of your perfect life on this earth, there's something in it where you know, but still my heart would not be at rest. That I couldn't live there forever. It would grind on me. There is some place I long for. I don't even know what it is, but I know what it would feel like when I got there. And it's the thing pulling me home. Pulling me on the journey, to be there, to go there. In the Lord of the Rings, they fight this big battle and they destroy the One Ring, all this stuff happens. And then what happens? Frodo gets home and he looks around and he goes, I can't live here anymore. And it's not that life isn't good. He bled for that life. It's just he outgrew it. What does he feel calling? The thing that I was really chasing the whole time wasn't actually to come back to my little house and eat crumpets. The real thing I was chasing was this glory that's now waiting on the other side of this ship, right? It's the image of death, right? I want to cross over and find out what it is that I fought for. I've tasted it a few times. I felt that hand reach out and grab my shoulder as I fought the good fight. And I know there was a crown waiting for me on the other side. I don't even know what that means, but I know that it means something more than anything I've ever had means. I can't express it. I can't communicate why it means something to me, but I know that it does. And every step I get closer to it, the more real that becomes and the less this stuff matters, until at the end you can let it go. You can let it go and you can say, it's all right. And step across. You see, a man can't really be a man unless he's ready to die. What is the hardcore men saying? Like, today is a good day to die. What is it saying? I'm ready for my exit. You can't be a man and not know where your chair is when the music stops playing. You have to be prepared for everything. You got to be prepared for when death knocks on your door. One of my favorite lines is that line from Gladiator. I'm probably going to butcher it. But he says, death comes for every man that smiles. And all that a real man can do is smile back. So you spend your whole life being afraid of it. You spend your whole life being afraid of losing what you have because this is all that you treasure. But when you walk with God and you live for Him and you hear that voice that reaches from beyond this world, the further you go into that discipleship, the further you chase the destiny of God, all of a sudden you realize the big part is not what I'm doing here. This is a leverage point to get me over there. Like, God's not so full, like, He wants you to do great things in this life. That's a big thing, and He wants to use it to help other people. But the main point of what you're doing here is crossing the finish line and getting in there. And the closer you get to it, the more it changes your heart that way. It shifts you. In destiny, the third chamber, your teacher is really life. God conspires with life to teach you about your destiny and your call. And that's what you're getting taught by, Like mama taught you about the haven, dad teaches you about training, life comes over and kicks you. That's what teaches you about failure and hardship, and God's training you alongside it. The journey, that's just life taking you on a crazy on a crazy course, but you know, it is death that teaches us about the mystery. And I don't just mean your death, I mean death all over the place. The wisdom in Ecclesiastes, the wisdom that you see throughout Scripture, it's people who see it. They see their own death. They see everyone else's death. They see the transience of it all. And not just like death, like physical death, but all the other things that die. Watching two of my grandparents get pretty old, and the heaviest thing that I see in their life is not that they know they're going to die. They've been prepared for that for a while. It's that their world is dying. All their friends are dead. The musicians that they liked are dead. The TV shows that they like are dead. Like everybody in them's dead. Nobody likes them anymore. The whole everything, the morality is dead. Everything that their world was has passed away, you know? There are other forms of death besides physical death. Dreams die. And passions die. Things that were so important to you, like this was what my life, well, this hobby was everything. And I was like, whatever, I don't care about this thing anymore. Things, there's this cyclic, like I said, it's just a dead repetition, and then eternity calls from behind it. There's something that reaches out and calls and pulls you, and death is the door to it in a whole bunch of ways. Dying to things, not just physical death, but dying to things is it's a gateway into glory, and a real warrior begins to learn that it isn't always about winning. Sometimes there's a defeat that's actually a door to greatness. The best image I have fought to try to figure out how to explain this. But we understand these ideas. We see them in metaphor all the time. Watch a big man movie, Braveheart, Gladiator, any of these movies. What happens? The guy dies. Why doesn't he win and ride off with the girl? Because it's the real message. The real message is in there is by the time you're done with your battle, you won't be fit for this planet anymore. You will transcend this life if you live out your destiny, and the only fitting thing is for you to step through into death, but it's not emptiness. Like, look at, these movies are not Christian movies by any standpoint, but in Braveheart, what's happening the whole time? He keeps having visions of his father and of his wife that are dead, and he's being called by them to transcend this life, to fight the fight until he's worthy. That's a metaphor for God, for people who don't want to put God in there. They don't want to put Jesus in the movie, so they put some dead people in the movie. Same thing in Gladiator, right? The whole movie, he keeps having visions of his wife and his kid that are already there, saying, come, finish the job so you can come over here. There's something, and again, he doesn't, it's a vision of his life on earth. Not his life on earth, it's going to be something else, but it gets realer and realer and heavier, and it's pulling him over. It allows him to do things that only warriors can do. They can throw their life away. They can die for somebody else. They can die for their enemies. How? Because something is calling them to something greater than anyone else can really understand. It's not something you can jump to. And a lot of people, they just fake it. A lot of people have fake mystery in their life. They act like they're fighting for something transcendent. The church is full of it. People acting like they're fighting for something transcendent. They don't have a hold of it at all. They're in the shallow waters, but they're acting like they're ready to get martyred. They're acting like they're weeping and all these things, like they have these deep experiences, and they're shallow. It's the same thing. You have people who are boasting and lying about things they don't have, and then you have people who betrayed themselves and run away from the things that scare them in God. And they're just trying to somehow wash that guilt off of themselves, marinate in grace or whatever, try to cover up that emptiness. But then there are people who step out and do it. And the best way I can explain this, and I think that these lessons are out there in life to be grasped, is these three lessons, and they're very metaphorical. I apologize. There's no other way to discuss this as far as I can tell.
Switch it up, bro. Sorry.
Yeah, switch it up, Mike.
Oh, you turn it off. Just a second. Turn this one off. Don't worry about that little thing.
Sure.
It's blinky. What's this one?
I'm gonna test it. I'm gonna go check to see if it's
Oh, unlock. Okay, sorry. Blinking. I don't think it's pairing. It's working? Okay. The blinking is making me question.
Yeah, me too. Yeah, this one's dead.
Will you double check? Because I'm worried about the delay. Like maybe he was just hearing me on the. You sure it's working? Yeah, it's not working, huh?
Can I see it?
Oh, behind.
You probably have to.
So could probably take. Oh, this needs to be turned on. It's not connected.
I'm not trying.
Yeah,
There you go.
Brief intermission while we make our machine work. Testing, testing, testing. If you hear testing, Robert, then it's on right. Do you hear testing, testing, testing? Okay, sorry about that, guys. Mic problems.
So I think the thing with this idea of mystery is that it is a small beginning, and it's something where you're following the voice of God and He's pulling you up from layer to layer.
This light shut off, bro.
Hmm?
This light shut off.
Is the battery dead?
I'm wondering if you got it.
Just unplug it. There you go. Sorry, we didn't charge all of our stuff. So, there is this chamber of the man's heart that is tuned for eternity. It's the eternity that God has set in our hearts. And we begin to see it. The longer we're in this life, the more we take the journey with God, the more we realize any fulfillment, any connection here is going to fall apart. It's going to die. It's going to rot. There's something transcendent that's calling us forward. There's a meaning beyond this world. And again, in religion, we say this stuff all the time. In Christianity, we say it all the time. People aren't usually connected with it. They'll talk like that, and then something will happen, and it spills out. You can tell, they're not there. They're ready to be martyred. Then the first little thing, no, I'm terrified, and they run away. It's like with the haven thing. We would like to think that our haven is not mom. But most soldiers on the battlefield, they get hit. What do they start screaming? Mommy. They lie because they're regressing back. What can they do? They're running they finally have to admit they need a haven, but their haven's still their mom. They never grew their training wheels. They just hid from it. In the same way we talk a big talk about mystery and I believe in heaven and I want heaven more than I want life, most people aren't really connected with those things. They don't really feel the pull of heaven. They hope that heaven's real because they're afraid of dying. That's different than feeling the pull of it. A warrior has to feel a pull where at some point he wants to die. He wants to be free. He wants to cross over that line. There's no fear in his eyes when it comes. He's not suicidal. He's not choosing it. But his heart does say, perhaps today is the day.
Yeah.
It's not with fear. It's with hunger. I want to take the next step in the adventure. I've outgrown these pair of shoes. I want to take them off. This tent isn't holding me, right? And I want to go and be clothed in my heavenly dwelling place. How does that happen? Well, I think it happens by these experiences. I'm going to try to lay this out. Again, this is very metaphorical. But maybe you'll catch what I'm talking about. The first lesson of this mystery is that there's always a greater game than the one that you're playing. So, if you're playing baseball, you might think that the point of this game is to be good at baseball. And then people go, wow, he's good at baseball. And you might play that way, and you might be so cutthroat and so mean, just in your face, and you're doing all this crazy stuff that everyone's like grossed out by how prideful you are. You don't realize it, but there's a game above the game you're playing, and you're losing the great game to win the little game. You're the best, pitcher in high school, but you know what? Everybody thinks you're a jerk because you are. That is the opposite of what you want to do, right? God is always calling us to be great at what we're doing right now, and then to lift up our eyes and realize this is a small part of something bigger, and to call you up to a bigger level of the game. We call it sportsmanship, right? When you can see bigger than the game. So it's not all about winning this game. There's a bigger story to life than just this game. So when you're kind to your enemies, when somebody gets hurt, you don't laugh, we're going to win the game. Did you see that? Their pitcher, he was up the bat and he just took a ball to the side of his head. He's not playing. We're going to win this thing. And then somebody says, let's call the game until he can get better. Let's call it, and when he's better, we'll replay. People are like, what are you doing? This is our chance. We could get to the championships or whatever. And it's like, what's going on? One guy's playing down here. One guy's playing up here. What happens, though, is when you transcend the game that you're in, you start playing a higher game, the people down here think you're an idiot. Because you're throwing away things down here to win stuff up here. This is what Jesus did in the Sermon on the Mount when he gave the Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are the persecuted. What is he talking about? He's saying the things you think are so horrible down here in this game are actually awesome up here in this game. Here's the problem. It's because the game is based on a mystery, because it's transcendent, you can't really communicate to anybody else what's working or why it's good. You try to. Like Jesus would be like, it's better to give than receive. It just doesn't compute for them. And until they experience it themselves, until they get to that level and they touch it, it doesn't make any sense. That's why people are so freaked out by deeply spiritual people. They come in and they flip everything upside down, but there's such a heavy anointing, you can't deny that they're wrong. You can be like, oh man, you can't deny them, be like, that guy's an idiot. But he's also Jesus, and he's clearly the Son of God. So you're in this place where you feel this imperative to destroy the person. Because they're transcending they're flipping your game upside down. I was winning, and you're going to throw my game away? You're like, yeah, your game's worthless, man. The actual game's up here. They're not ready to make that leap. That's incredibly threatening. Doesn't make sense that they would hate you and try to kill you, but it does once you get there. You go, oh, of course. I'm blowing. There's nothing I can do to explain to them. I still have to do this. But that's what's going on. There's seasons in your life where you're like, it's not about this macho head game, it's about being a man. And then there's something about being a father, and there's things that just keep getting bigger, and you keep shifting up to the next game. And there'll be a time in your life where you transcend the game to the point where you're like, it's not really about living and dying, it's not really about suffering. Well, you'll look at death and you'll be like, it's okay. Or you can say no to the chemotherapy, and they're like, what are you doing? Fight. And you'll be like, no, I know what my God is calling me to do to this. You're going to die if you do this. You can't go back and preach there. They'll kill you. Like Paul, you could say, yeah, they're going to arrest me, and yeah, I'm going to lose my head over this one. It's okay, though. How can you do that? Because you keep playing the bigger game, step by step, throughout your life. That's what the journey's really about. You think it's about this earthly goal that God has given you, and you do chase that, and you should fulfill it. But at some point, everybody gets the Nebo. At some point, God says, your journey stops here. And you go, but it continues. And you go, well, for other people it will. The only one who gets to go on this journey from the beginning all the way to the end is God. Everybody else is just getting dropped in for a section and getting pulled back out of the game. But what happens is when you transcend those boundaries, you go, it's okay. There's a greater thing. I can't even say what it really is, but it's potent and it's powerful. And it's calling me home. It bestirs my heart. And I want to see his face. I don't even know what that really means, but I can't put it into words. I know what it means on the sense of I know the part of me that cries out for it. I know the part of me that will not be at rest until I am there with him, experiencing whatever the heck you call this thing. The symbols aren't enough. The words aren't enough. It's transcendent to any of our markers. There is a greater game. And And your warrior's heart will stagnate if you're not looking for it. Wherever you're at, you need to be looking up a little bit higher and say, God, what is this really about? I'm playing for these stakes, but I know this is just a rung on a ladder that goes up and up and up. What's the bigger game to be played here? And God will tell you things like, lose this part. Look bad to this person. Let that guy take the credit for it. He'll tell you things that don't he's making you lose the game down here. Why? Because that's often what it costs to win the game at a higher level. And that's why there's a point, right, where the warrior dies and yet he wins as he's dying. Where death, like Jesus dying on the cross, looks like he lost. Wrong. Greatest victory. That's what happens. People won't get it. In the beginning, they'll just like, that's not a good idea. You're going to mess up your life. But eventually you get up there and it gets pretty crazy. And eventually it always costs you your physical life. Eventually you'll face it, and you'll face death, and you'll die, and you'll laugh back when it comes. Because what's on the other side of this is just right there. There's just a little gauzy thing between you and it right now. When you start seeing through it more and more and more, eventually that is more real to you than this. And death, when it comes, you laugh at it and what is it? It's nothing. It's a door that I'm going to step through into what I really want. It's just a doorway to glory. And metaphorically, we really see that. Like, that's the hero. The hero is the guy who is not afraid to die. He runs right into death. It doesn't matter. Like William Wallace getting his head chopped off or whatever else. We've used the images over and over again in all these different movies, but that's the idea. It's that transcendence of death where it's like, I'm not afraid of dying. You realize I wasn't ever afraid of dying. I was afraid of dying as a failure. I was afraid of not being able to cross over to the right side. I was afraid that this was all that this was because I didn't know about that. I wasn't in connection with that. I just had a hollow place there. And that's what God's leading us into. There are four chambers, if you will, to a man's heart that make him a joyful warrior, that empower him to live for God, to live for his family, and to be the man he's called to be. One chamber is called the haven. It's where you find peace with God about who you are. It's the home base, the building block, the foundation for everything else. The next chamber is that training field. It's where you sharpen yourself. It's where you grow in confidence. It's where you grow in power with God and in mastery. As he points out, they can be tiny things, little things. Master this, master that. And you walk through the lessons of manhood with God and you learn those things. The chamber of destiny, where you embrace the call of God upon this life and you actually pursue it. You take the steps he's calling you to take. And then there's the chamber of mystery, of glory. Something that this life doesn't contain. You chase your destiny for the glory, but you don't even really know what it is. And as you get closer, you realize the glory doesn't really have anything to do with the finish line of this thing. It was the journey that enables me to step over to it. And God can call the game at the very end, before I can finish it, be like, I gotta. But then you realize, no, I don't. The door is opening, I'm ready. And a man needs that. A man needs a place of unshakable peace he can go to get healed up. A man needs to have a sense of his own growth at all times. A man needs a master and a mission, and not to be a mercenary. And a man needs to know that he can face anything and everything, that death is just a door. He needs to know where his chair is when the music stops playing at the end of his life. And as you grow in those things, as you possess those things, there is an alignment with what God created you to be as a man. I felt God speaking to that even today in the midst of worship, was this idea of how hungry God is for us to step into those things. That really you have to step up and be a man before you can be a man of God. God's not looking for any boys of God. He's not looking for any babies of God. He's looking for men of God. Women of God too, but that's not available to you. If you're a man, all you can do is be a man of God, if you're going to be anything at all. You got to be a man of God before you can be a disciple of Christ, a vessel for his presence. Before God can come in power and do amazing things amongst us, we have to be living up to it. It has to be a door he can walk through. And if you're running from what a man is, whether it's bad parenting or screwed up culture, devastating trauma, whatever, it will hold back everything else in your life. There's nothing that you can do if you're not who God created you to be. And gender and your role as a man is such a base foundational part. You cannot just be, I'm going to be a cultural whatever. I don't know if you want to like really identify as men anymore, but you can't be what this world sells on that and build anything else on top of it that God wants. You want to be a good husband, you want to be a good father, you want to grow up to be an evangelist or a pastor or a prophet or anything that God has called you to do. You want to stand before the throne of thrones one day with crowns on your head and joy on your face. You're not going to get there unless you put your boots on and you start being a man in your life right now. And I just wanted to throw this out here. I felt God was calling it to point out some things that maybe we throw to the wayside. Try to take a shortcut, become a man faster without taking the stops that are necessary. Because man, opportunities were wasted in my childhood and I just got to get there faster. There's no shortcuts. God will return the years the mothworm has eaten. He'll give it back to you, but you have to walk it out the way he's asking you to do it. You can't skip the haven. You can't. You have to get filled. You have to go to that place. You can't avoid the humiliation and the rejection that happens in the training field. You have to learn how to handle that. You have to embrace your calling. You can't just say, well, I'll be a Christian, whatever happens will happen, life will go as it. You have to embrace the call of God in your life, as scary as that might be. You have to take real steps towards it. And even in the midst of that situation, you have to keep lifting your head up and asking God, give me a new set of values, give me a new set of goals, call me up to a higher game, call me up higher, even though you know it will take you away from everything in this world, even relationships in this world, even people who love and care for you will be like, I don't really get him as much as I used to. It's getting so spiritual, man, I don't understand him after that. Doesn't mean they're going to love you any less, but they will understand you less. There's death all over that journey, but there's life too. It's a life far beyond anything you could ever ask or even dream or even imagine what's on the other side for us, what God's calling us to. And as you start to draw close to it, believe me, there will be one thing you know without any qualification, and that's you've made the right choice. And what you're pursuing is better than anything that God is calling you to let go of or to leave behind. And you will also know, and I think this is one of the cooler parts, you will also know to the depths of your heart that you're a man. A man among men, you can lift your head high and enter the kingdom of God with a smile on your face. You don't have to be ashamed to stand before your sons and your grandsons and 100 generations that might come forth from you to stand tall and say, follow me as I follow Christ. Be a man. They will say, well, you know what you're talking about. And to have that and to think, and my son shall follow. Think one day that your boy might stand up like that before you. And that you might sit in the shade of his tree. That you might stand up being a little bit more like him and thinking, oh, I'm a little bit more like my son. And guess what? That means I'm a little bit more like Jesus. That's how well he's doing. That's what it's about, gentlemen. That's what a father's heart hungers for. That's what being a man is all about. And like I said, at least in the secular world, and I celebrate my wife anytime I get the chance. Stand up and celebrate mothers who are doing it right. That's a fantastic thing. At first I was kind of thrown when I'm putting this message together. I wasn't really realizing it was going to be actually on Mother's Day. But when it hit me, like God was just saying, this is the greatest gift that we could give to Him, that we could give to the world, that we can give to the women in our lives, the mothers, whether it's your mother or the mother of your children. The greatest gift that we can give them is men that will actually stand up and be the bulwark, that will be the wall that stands between them and the darkness and gives them space to do what they're called to do. That we might build families and communities in the Church of Christ in this place, a shining beacon that protects the people that we love and care about until we all cross over Jordan and come to the place where we belong. That's what we're here to do, to fight that fight and to be those warriors. So I want to encourage you in closing, in handing you the parts, in handing you those 4 parts of the heart, that there is joy to be had that is more than whatever you're holding to right now. You just need to let that stuff go. You need to say, God, what is it that you're pointing to right in my life? What is the chamber of my heart that I'm burying and leaving empty, that you're calling me to start walking out in? And what are the gatekeepers there? What are the fears? What are the lusts? What are the counterfeits that are keeping me from following you in that area of my life? God is there. The words are on the tip of His tongue. If you will open your ear, if you'll turn your heart and say, God, what is it for me? He'll start pointing you to the next step, so that you can be a full man with a full heart. All 4 chambers beating in synchronous with the heart of the Father in heaven. Lord, I thank you for this message. I thank you for the brothers and the sisters I have here at Iona Fellowship. I thank you for this day. We're going to go up and start cooking dinner for the ladies and celebrate Moms, God. I pray that we truly would have grateful hearts for the women that you've given us, for the children, and for the mothers that watch over them. And God, I pray that we would be a blessing to the people in our lives, that we'd be a blessing in your holy name, that we would take what we have so freely received from you and freely share it with those around us. We pray this in the mighty name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, our Lord, our Savior, our King, our friend, our captain. We love you, Lord. Thank you for this day. Amen.